streaming software to go live, but it shows excellent connection. Oh, here we go. There's a go live button. I think this is going to work.
Are you live, Johnny?
We are live on the Turbo Makes Games YouTube channel as well.
All right.
Awesome.
So I guess we are ready to start. Yeah. So this is the first time I'm going to use this software for streaming. I know that I should be maybe using something called Restreamer and such. And it's been, I think it's like $20 a month, and I think it's possibly going to be worth all the hassle of setting us up this thing through Flatten Live. So if this ends up being okay, I'll stick to it. If it ends up sucking badly, like now, I will possibly just pay the $20 a month. And of course, if you buy me a coffee,
yeah, I mean, I'll
probably.
I feel like I might want to end up doing that soon, because I definitely do want to get back into doing the live stream stuff. I know, we have some cool things that we want to talk about, and there's some other people that I've been chatting with that want to come on some live streams, talk about some dot stuff. So definitely excited. But yeah, it looks like we got some people in the chat. Good to see you, Luke, Big Fat Mama, more of our. Great to see y'all. Welcome in. Looks like, yeah, we are live on the Turbo Makes Games YouTube channel as well. Of course, we are here with Ruben. He's live over on his channel, The Game Dev Guru. Go check him out. Give him a subscribe. I believe I do have a link down in the description below where you can go subscribe to his channel. But yeah, welcome in, Ruben. What's going on?
And you have done this introduction like at least 20 times, right? You sound so natural. I think I sound like more like a robot, right? If you ever heard like this Loquendo TTS, right? The text-to-speech. I'm sure I sound more like that. How many
times? I sound robotic?
I don't know. It's not natural. How many times will it take me to do this to get good at it, Johnny? From experience.
I don't know. It's different for everybody. Some people get it like right off the rip, and I've done. I think I've done a ton of YouTube videos now. But anyways, we are here to.
Let me actually introduce say hi to the people that have my channel. Cheesy, nice name. Reminds me of the cheese strategies in StarCraft, which I used to practice a lot myself. You know the cheese, right?
yeah, of course.
Also, Glenneru. I'm pretty bad at pronouncing nicknames, but yeah, welcome here. Always use OBS for streaming. Yeah, the problem is that we normally have some problems with our internet providers. If you are living in Europe, any of you, or at least in Germany, be careful and not get Vodafone, because I actually made the mistake of taking Vodafone, and I get problems with this every single time. But Scotsman, awesome. LOD sounds like a great use case for dots. Yep, it's going to be a special use case, I have to say, okay, about dots. Okay, I can show you all the stuff that I've been doing for my client, obviously, or I would just, go to jail. Probably some lawyer will just knock at the door right now during the live stream and just point a gun at my head. But we will see something similar, right, to what I had to do, right?
Yeah, you'll end up going to court, and Phoenix Wright will be the lawyer of the the other guy.
Yeah, indeed. But okay, Dupe, I think that's Jerome. I always forget about the nicknames. He's saying that you are such a pro. I guess that's a compliment, Johnny. So you should say
you're a pro. Yeah.
You are a pro.
I'm a pro.
Yeah.
No, you're the pro here, man.
You guys see some glitches or something on the video signal? Because on the preview of my channel,
yeah, on my preview, I am seeing a little bit of glitches. Oh, it looks like we got Jason's story in here. What is going on? So that's why the internet is struggling. Maybe there are some glitches coming through.
Yeah, I'm gonna change the layout. And I promise, if this ends up sucking so bad, I'm just gonna pay the $20 a month for something like Restream. Welcome Mario, and welcome Ross Adams. I already know a few people here. By the way, I'm not making you small on purpose, Johnny. I'm just going to try if this layout works a bit better, but I think the glitch is still there, right? Not sure. Let's see. I should have 3 monitors, right? I was always like, why would I need 3 monitors? I have enough with 1 or even 2, right? But
Yeah,
now I was
I got
just
3
left
monitors.
to
It's
have
the way to
3
go, man.
monitors. Okay, I put you back on the screen, side to side. Let's see if it's better. Okay, guys, so let me explain what's cooking in the meantime. For
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
you
yeah,
just need
absolutely.
audio, right? You don't need to have to see a pretty face. Of course, I'm talking about mine, not Johnny's, to see that.
Hey.
Okay, so basically, I do a lot of consulting work for performance, right? And one of my clients had one interesting use case where they had to use custom codes to disable and disable components, right? Depending on the distance. And for that, we could not use the LOD system from Unity because we needed more flexibility than just, just say deactivate this thing depending on the distance, right? So we needed tons of flexibility. And of course, there's the usual approach in object-oriented programming would be to just check the distance on every frame or wherever, and depending on the distance, then you do something. Maybe activate or deactivate an object, like a game object, or you could just disable a few components or do custom stuff. Okay, that's the use case that I had. In our case, we had hardware that's pretty sucky. I have it on the table. It's HTC Flow, which is like a VR headset, which is pretty
Okay.
thin. It's very cool,
Like
and
a
because it's
standalone one?
thin, yeah, it's kind of standalone, but it barely has any battery. So you always have to
Hmm.
be with a cable like this. And I
Okay,
had like a
okay.
cable like this long or something, and I was always testing like this. So I guess this is one of the reasons I ended up going to physiotherapy. To be honest.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so the chipset is pretty bad. I mean, it's okay, right? It's a Snapdragon XR1, whatever. It's a slow CPU, and of course, I couldn't just do this 500 times per frame, right? In this case, we had like 500 objects, and I couldn't just be running this LOD manual LOD system, calculating distances and doing all of this sequentially. Of course, this is what we tried at the beginning, right? And this is actually something that we can maybe do as well here on the live stream, so that you guys get the context for what we are going to talk about.
Yeah,
Right,
no,
Jenny?
and yeah, no, and just to kind of like give a little bit more context, yeah, you reached out to me and were like, hey, I think I got this kind of system, and there's I want to see if we can improve it by using like the job system or something like that, and we kind of were talking a little bit, and we figured that this might be a kind of an interesting opportunity for us to do a little live stream to kind of show you one way that we can create like a simple little LOD system, basically using dots. And yeah, we can kind of like get into kind of all the theory behind what we'll do and everything like that too. And yeah, just kind of walk you all through kind of what we're doing and maybe do a little bit of performance comparisons and see actually how much performance that we can actually increase out of this little implementation here. So yeah.
Just for clarification, I will be acting like a dummy, okay? As if I was just coming from object-oriented programming and I had like very little idea about data-oriented programming. Now, partly this is true. Partly this is true because I have lost a lot of practice. Last year I spent 3 months making games for a AAA company in just dots. But then I came back after 1.5 years and I was like, what was this? What is a variable? What is a component? But what I want to say is that a big part of what we are going to talk about is me faking having little idea about all of this, right? And part of that will actually be true, right? So I would just try to be as useful as I can to you guys, right? To you when you have different levels of experience. In any case, feel free to drop questions on the chat. I will be harassing Johnny with a lot of questions. So
Yeah,
you
no,
can ask
please
us one.
do. I already do see one question here, and I can kind of start answering this as maybe you start pulling your project up and everything like that. But it comes from Delightful Games. Question: is LOD missing from dots completely, as in you have to develop it from scratch? So yeah, basically the Unity's built-in LOD system is not going to work with dots. Basically, what we're going to be doing today is we're not actually developing off of like a base dots project. We're using like a base game object mono behavior type project. And then we're going to be kind of using dots to basically kind of like streamline some of the distance calculations for this LOD system. so that we're not, like processing all this stuff on the main thread, all single thread and everything like that. So we're actually going to be using dots as kind of like, basically we're going to have like kind of a companion entity simulation happening in the background, where each game object kind of has an entity associated with it. And then kind of doing that, we can basically do these distance calculations for our LOD system, and then we
Johnny,
can trigger. Yes.
you dropped for a second, or I dropped.
Oh.
I don't know. Just repeat
Oh.
the last sentence.
Yeah, no. I was just saying that basically we're gonna kind of end up having like a companion entity type simulation, so that our game objects are each going to have an entity associated with them, and then the entities are actually going to be doing some more of those like complex, heavier distance calculations, where we can actually leverage the burst compiler as well as the C# job system. And that will actually trigger whether we want to, like enable or disable rendering on our specific game object renderer components. So that's kind of like a high level overview about, what we're doing. And then we're going to, just get into it a little bit more here. But yeah, I do see that you are sharing your screen here, Ruben. So why don't you give us a little rundown about the base project that you have us working with here?
All right. First, I would like to get some confirmation from someone that the quality is okay enough so that it is actually readable, what I'm showing. In fact, I'm going to show my dummy LOD system in code, just to not be, wasting your time as well, right? Can someone tell me if the quality is fine? Is it readable and such?
It looks good on my end, but
Really, I only have like a small window like this, and of course, I'm not going to be able to read anything from this window. How can you
well,
say
I mean,
it?
it just what I'm receiving from the streaming software from you. Like it looks good enough. I wish I
All
could go
right.
full screen on this streaming software here, but
We can actually go full
anyhow.
screen, but then I have to remove our
No.
webcams, and I
I
don't
mean
know.
just on my end. I
Oh
just
yeah,
mean on my end.
okay,
All that is good now that you're zoomed in.
perfect. So people are saying we are fine. It took a while for people to actually to answer. I guess there's a huge delay or something, like maybe
Yeah, there's
20
just a little,
seconds. All right, so
stream
let's get
delay.
started. The background is really simple. Like I said, maybe if you're joining recently this stream, I just need to create a custom LOD system, pretty simple, that just compares the distance, and I can do something about this information, right? In this case, what I want to do is to disable the mesh renderer of these cubes, right? So for example, if I just had one cube, let me see if I hit the jackpot. Yeah, I hit it. It is here. I just want to do something like this, right? I could give you more context about this if you want. For example, I can tell you that this, enabling or disabling the mesh renderer is much cheaper than activating or deactivating the entire object. I can also tell you things like it is not enough to go to this cube and say, I'm going to move it to a layer that it's actually not rendered. For example, I don't know, water, right? I could just go to the camera, and I could think, if I didn't know Unity, I could think that if I don't render to this Colin mask, right? This is fine. No, it is not. You're still paying a huge price for this. I have to say, I've done a lot of testing, okay? I know why this is the case
You
and
are the
such.
performance guru,
Yes. Thank
the
you,
game
Johnny.
dev
It's
guru.
good to have someone remind me this from time to time. Also, it is not enough to call the force rendering flag or force rendering off flag to set it to false either. It still has a lot of overhead, right? For example, I could just go here and say force rendering off and say true, and you could think that it has no overhead anymore in terms of rendering, but it is not the case either, okay? That still has a huge impact on the cooling part, okay, in Frustrum cooling. But yeah, not to speak about that because yeah, we would go into a different discussion. What I want to do, again, Johnny, is to disable this damn mesh renderer depending on the distance, just like this, like a click and click, all right? So what I would do if I had little idea about this and I didn't know Johnny, or I didn't have a Johnny in my life, would be to do something like, okay, so this is my mesh. Right? Just let me know if I do something wrong, okay, Johnny? and I want to compare it to a specific point, right? In this case, it could be, let's call this reference point, this transform. And I'm just going to hard code it to the camera, right? So I'm going to do camera main transform. Transform. It's always better to reference or to cache exactly what you need. Okay. So if you need a transform, always cache the transform. Do not cache the camera unless you actually need it. Okay. Because accessing the transform is expensive. So if I had this reference point, I could just do something like if vector 3 distance at this reference point position to this transform position is bigger than, I'm just going to hard code it for now, than 1, then I do something, right? And actually, I can do a bit better. And I can just create a Boolean that is like, I don't know, too far away. Okay. So it's the case that is far away, then I have to disable that and so on and so on. So mesh renderer enabled is not too far away, right? This should be pretty simple. Did I do it right, Johnny? Anything to say about my code?
No, that seems like fine. Again, very basic, simple implementation. And yeah, again, that's kind of, what we're doing today is we're just doing like a real simple implementation here. Of course, you can get, a lot more complex with these LOD systems. But yeah, we're just kind of doing, it's like some basic theory here. And, depending on how much time we have, I think there are a couple cool little optimizations that we could make that would be fun. But yeah, no, looks good so far.
Yeah, we start with the problems, Johnny. In this case, it's Unity, being a bit stupid. Sharing violation on path. What did I do wrong now?
What is that all about?
I don't know. Just let me restart Unity. This is always fix that. Oh, I need to hide the projects I'm working on. I just search for a frame, right? No worries. That's just the name of the projects. No one is going ever to sue me, right? Hopefully. And actually, if someone knocks at the door, let me know in the chat or something, because I have kind of noise isolating headphones, so I will not hear it.
Aren't you a popular guy? People come into your house all the time?
No, never happened, but you never know. You cannot ever be too safe. So people tell me, can you use the square distance? Oh, Jesus. Instead, of course, that we can do. I'm not going to focus so much on this type of optimizations, but indeed that would be the way to go.
Yeah, actually, there's a cool little trick that we can do with ECS that kind of goes alongside that. So that's something that, if we have a little bit of time, we might be able to add in. Oh, you have more errors now. Great. I don't even know if I've ever seen that system IO exception sharing violation.
Wait, don't we have Jason Story on the live stream? He's a pro in Unity. Come on, Jason, help us. Okay, now let's see.
If you clear out the console, I mean, what sticks?
Yeah, that doesn't work. I will just try to maybe clear the stupid library folder now. That's always the next step.
Well, is it still compiling or something? Oh, yeah.
No, it was not, I think. And if it was, anyway, I closed it.
All right. Well, I guess, yeah, while you figure that out, maybe you could just you don't have to share your screen. We can just kind of talk a little bit more about the theory of the optimizations that we're going to be making here, if you want to.
Let's do that.
Just so you can stop sharing your screen if
you
want, so you're not doxing yourself. But yeah, so basically, kind of like I was talking about a little bit. Well, I think Ruben is just showing your screen right now, at least on my end.
This is actually not me anymore. This is the stupid software I'm speaking about. Yeah.
Oh, it says I'm hidden.
Don't worry, I get it.
Okay, I think we're good now. All right, it's just me. Hello. So yeah, basically, kind of the theory behind.
No worries, keep talking.
Okay,
fix this.
We're good. We're good. So yeah, basically, again, kind of the theory that we're going to be doing is basically we have this game object project that Ruben was just showing off here. And again, we're kind of doing a very simple LOD system where, everything within or past a certain distance from the camera is just going to have its renderer disabled. It's still going to be, essentially part of the simulation. So if it was, moving around, it could be, still doing all those sorts of things. And if it, comes within range, then the mesh renderer would be enabled. So again, just a, very simple LOD system here. Basically, what we're going to be doing is going to be using the ECS entity component system to create basically a companion entity for each game object. So we're going to have just like a little script on each of these game objects that when it gets spawned in the world, it's going to go ahead and create an entity that is associated with it. Now, this entity is going to have basically kind of like some references to the original base game object. And we're going to be using some built-in systems that, by the way, I am getting a warning on my live stream saying that the bitrate is a little low. So hope everything is all good. But anyways, basically what we're going to be doing is the entity, the companion entity, is going to get its position from the game object, basically using a kind of like built-in thing to Unity dots. Basically, there is this component that we can add to an entity, which is copy transform from game object. And then we basically just have a reference to the original game object transform. And then there is a built-in system in the ECS transformation systems that automatically, essentially copy the values from the game object to that companion entity. Now, the reason we want that is this companion entity is really not going to have much associated with it. It's basically just going to have the ECS equivalent of a transform component, which we'll get into. So it just kind of knows physically where it is in the world. And that's about it as far as just kind of like basically what's on that entity. Now, using that information, we can kind of do our distance checks with the entity itself and the main camera or the target point or whatever we want our LOD system to run based off of. And then using ECS, we're going to be creating a job which is going to allow us to basically do some multi-threading and take advantage of the burst compiler to do these distance calculations much more efficiently. And then basically based off of whatever we find through those distance calculations, we're just going to add or remove some components to basically just tag empty components to these entities. And then we're going to have a follow-on system that basically runs on everything with these, special tags. And then that will actually trigger the enabling and disabling of the renderer. Now, the reason we actually do this in a separate system is because when we reference things on the game object, such as like the mesh renderer, just to enable it or disable it, we have to do this all single threaded without the burst compiler. So the reason we want to do that in a separate system is so we can do the distance calculations all multi-threaded with the burst compiler and all that. And then we'll have that follow-on system that basically just comes through and says, hey, is there anything that needs to change its renderer state? And then we'll just go ahead and run that enable or disable. So that's basically the long and short of what we're going to be doing here today. But how does that sound, Ruben? You got any questions on it so far?
Can you repeat what you said? I'm joking. What's a companion?
Rewind the stream.
What's a companion entity?
Yeah. So a companion entity basically is just like, so an entity is kind of like a game object. You can kind of think of it in that some kind of sense, where it's basically just something that associates a number of components with it. In this case, we're just having an entity again with basically just a transform component, so it kind of knows where it physically lives in the world, although it doesn't again have any renderer components or anything like that. And then I call this the companion entity just because every game object that we're going to be running this LOD system against is going to have one of these entities associated with it. So that basically is, again, just kind of a companion representation, as you will. So does that kind of answer your question?
Of course, man. Of course. I mean, I mean, what else can I say without looking stupid? So people in my channel, they're saying that you make it sound so easy. Hey, I'm glad to read this because that means that we might be able to teach you guys a lot, right? We might be able to learn a lot, right?
Yeah,
If that
and no,
sounds
I
easy,
think
but it's not, well, we are going to address right now. This,
yeah, no,
yeah.
I think with dots, like once you kind of like understand the theory and like how to think in a data oriented way, like it is easy. Like again, as far as the theory goes, now the implementation of it is not always easy, especially because we are working with like experimental Unity packages here, and weird things go wrong. And yeah, I've been encountering some random bugs with some of the projects that I've been working on lately. But that's all part of the game. But yeah, I think when you do kind of get the theory, like you can just break it down because it's literally just data that you're looking at, and when you kind of like figure out how to like actually best use a data oriented paradigm, like it just kind of makes sense.
It's just all about the data, right? Johnny,
It's all
before
about
we
the data,
start,
baby.
one important question. How
Please.
do I get one of the t-shirts that you have, man?
um,
You printed just one or something?
this
Or
is this is
you
a one-off. I bought this for GDC because I was going to be on the Unity's live stream, so I got this, and then I got another a long sleeve one. That's
nice.
cool.
Nice,
It's
nice, nice.
blue and it's just white, so it's not like colored logo or anything like that.
I cannot imagine what's behind that t-shirt. Is it also a tattoo or something? In your chest
Is
or
it what?
something like that? Is it maybe a tattoo as well or something?
Yeah, I have performance by default tatted across my chest. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm
All right.
kidding.
Let
I'm
me
kidding.
try to share the screen without
Cool.
things
By the
going
way, welcome in
wrong.
Yorai. Great to see you in the chat here.
Wait, your eye is in your channel, it's not on mine?
Yeah,
Your
man.
eye! I thought we were friends.
No, he's more friends with me.
Yeah. BS. Okay. Um, we should be seeing soon again the screen sharing. Just a bit of patience. So it's activated.
Did you get your errors cleared
And
up?
yes, I just had to
It was
delete
just
the
deleting the library
library
folder.
folder and wait. I mean, it's good that you talked for so long because
I
gave
I
me
know how
my
I
computer some
know how
time.
Unity can be sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys should be seeing my screen, right? And
Oh,
now
that's
there are
weird. I
no
can
more
see it on the stream, but I can't see
errors.
it on the our thing here.
I think we're fine, Johnny. Let's
Yeah,
put some courage.
I'll
Okay,
figure it out.
so basically the code is kind of the same. I just changed this distance to 10 meters, right? Yes, we can do the distance square and such, which is important. But sometimes, in my experience, it is also very important to know that we are calling the same thing 500 times. And just the context switching, right, of loading one specific object into the stack frame and all of these things is just going sometimes to be more expensive than just the square root calculation. Okay, that's been my experience often enough. So people tend to focus a lot on ALU optimization, right, the arithmetic logic unit type of operations, but very often, a big part of this cost is also just coming from just loading stuff into your cache, right, of the CPU. So if you're just switching between objects or scripts or components, a big part of this price is going to be exactly that, right? Especially if you're using the update function where Unity has to call it for you, right? It's doing the call from C++, and this cost this is an expensive cost, right? This transition from the C++ world, where Unity knows everything about your stuff, to the C# world, which is your world, right? So here we
My
have
world.
the cubes. I'm just going to leave them here and take one cube and put it at 0, 0, 0. And at some point, I can just move this cube and it's going to be looking good until I get far away from that. And beyond 10 meters, then we get what I accomplished, what I wanted to accomplish, right? To disable that mesh renderer. So in theory, I would think that I'm done, right? And if I actually build this game, Again, it's kind of an exaggerated term for this, right? But if at some point I
Simulation.
build this and I deploy this on the device, you will see that it's not cool, right? So reason for this is we have tons of these objects, right? So every time that Unity calls this update function, it does it from C++. And that has a cost, right? So for every entity that you have, well, I think I'm using the word entity too early. For every mono behavior that you have, it's going to call it from C++. That's going to have a big cost overhead. One thing you could do about this is to aggregate your update functions in what I call the batch update manager, which is one of the scripts that I have. I think it's called CPU slicing. So basically, I just renamed this to batch update. So Unity is not going to call this, right? And then I just create an aggregator that has one update and calls these batch updates together. If you have questions about this, just let me know. I can just put a link to a blog post where I explain this. That would make things easier. But still, every time I call the update function, I would need the CPU to load information about the instance or the object of this component, right? And that's also going to take quite some time. And after that, of course, we are calculating distances, right? So we need to access the position of the reference point, which is a transform. And for this, we also do some calculations. And again, I need to access my transform to make this kind of position calculation, right? And at the end of the day, this distance is not going to cost you that much compared to all the memory operations that we are doing, right? Because if we are targeting mobile, especially, memory is a big problem. It usually generates a lot of bottlenecks. Memory is expensive. Memory bandwidth. Okay, memory capacity is not such a big problem anymore, but memory bandwidth is expensive. So
Yeah. And actually, yeah, before we go any further, would we be able to get some like performance metrics of just kind of like your base implementation? And then I don't know if you have this kind of aggregate update method working as well.
no, I didn't do it. Right. I mean, I could do it, but we can just
That's
take
fine.
the
But you have
average.
that base one still working, right? The
Yeah, this
just
one.
like the one that you just made,
Yep, should still work.
just where everyone has their own update method.
Actually, I can already give you a tip on this, guys. I have a super OP CPU. Still very slow for Unity standards because I always have to wait one stupid minute for Unity to recompile everything. But still, it's a quite fast computer, right? It's one of the Ryzen with 32 cores, whatever. So sometimes you will see that even if you do millions of operations, this is still going to be very fast, right? Let me see if actually I can find this somewhere. Should be in behavior update. And here we have the cost of my script, right? Which is going to be 0.3 milliseconds, which is huge if we were doing this in VR, okay, in mobile, but we are not, okay? We are safe. I mean, in the case of my client, it's actually VR, but anyway, in this case, we are fine. 0.3 milliseconds, substantial, okay? It is substantial when you are targeting 70 plus FPS. And this is the cost, right? So if I clicked on this window, I would see my dummy LOD system update is taking this instance 0.005. In total, it's taking 0.2, right? However, you will see that the whole behavior update is taking longer than that, right? It's taking 0.28. And part of this is because of these gaps, right? You see these gaps. So I do not know exactly why there is a gap, because it is a gap. But my obvious suspicion about this is Unity taking time to call your different update functions from C++. So that's one type of overhead that I was talking about before that would explain partly why we have this gap, right? And other than that, I don't know, there are some other things that I might think about when it comes to this gap, but so far it is this. Normally, it could also be that you are just lacking, to add some baking profiling from the profiling API and such, but this is not the case. Okay, this is Unity being slow. So there we go. We have 0.28, and this is the case for 100 objects. Actually, this is quite expensive, I have to say, for
Yeah, I was
just
gonna say I
100
thought this was like with 1,000, but
objects. Okay, we have a question, by the way.
Let's hear
So
it.
can I ask what technique you used to determine the cost of the other techniques, like putting an object on a specific layer you mentioned and not rendering it by the camera? Oof. Maybe I can show you the project where I did these measures, okay? And actually, that will be a really good lesson by itself, because I use a lot of the APIs that people do not use, and to actually measure these things, right? Things that I already talked about in the performance task force, but I'm not going to promote anything, okay? So just focus on this project, or focus on the project. We will come back to that later, okay? And if we forget,
Do
just
you have
remind
the
me.
ability to spawn more cubes in this project? I just kind of want to get some like
Yeah.
good performance metrics before we actually kind of do our companion optimization, just to kind of get kind of like a baseline with the game objects, and then we'll do our kind of implementations and
I
see
just
where
want my
we're at.
computer to crash, man. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. It's not recording. Whew. Okay, so let's see. So do we see blue colors? So that's already meaningful, right? Just go to behavior updates. And I have no idea why I have a 0.2 millisecond gap there. I think that's exaggerated. But yeah, we can ignore
Is that still
that.
with about 100 game objects?
No, this is with 1,000.
Okay.
And honestly, you can always make up for a performance bottleneck by adding thousands and thousands, and you can always say, okay, yeah, but that's not real life. But actually, it is. Okay, in the case of my client, we had about 500 objects, and a similar process was taking about 4 milliseconds. So that is meaningful. Okay, 500 entities or objects
totally.
is not something like just a practice exercise, right? To justify dots or something. No, it's actually real stuff. It's real meat. So with 1,000, it is 1.40. Okay, in this case.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go further than that because it's going to just bring down my stream, and we are going to mess it up. Okay? I think 100 is actually enough for now. We can ramp it up later. So this is the Nubi-like implementation. I would possibly think about when it comes to doing a custom LOD system, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like 50 years ago. Okay, not nowadays, but 50 years ago. Okay, Johnny, do your magic. What do we do here?
Let us get into it. All right. So first thing I should point out that you already did is you already have imported the entities package just by going to your package manager, adding a package from the Git URL from com.unity.entities. Of course, if you're not familiar with the process, I do have a few videos on my channel going over kind of how to do that. But yeah, just wanted to point out that you do already have the entities packages in your game, so we can start making some dot stuff right away. So I think probably the best place for us to start is to be, create our kind of companion entities here. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a script that will go on each of these game objects. And then what that's going to do is it's basically just going to spawn the companion entity and get it all set up. So I'm going to have you go ahead and create a new mono behavior script. And I still can't see your screen, so we're gonna be.
Maybe you can just go to my or your YouTube channel, watch it.
Yeah, I guess I can do that. There's gonna be a little bit of a delay, but
muted. Oh, right. Okay. Not sure if I have a better solution. Maybe I can just share it on Discord. Can I call you on Discord? Do you have your permission?
That might mess with the stream a little bit. Maybe if you just like try stop sharing your screen and start it again, because I think that's what happened. That'll kick it into gear.
Okay, you mean in Flatten Live, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do that. So I am sharing this again. I'm trying, Johnny. I know. Just wait 1 second. This software is pretty bad. What? The three things together now? Okay.
Oh, is there? Is there?
I don't know.
It's loading. It's black.
Is it? Should actually be working now. Yep. Looks good on my side. Not on yours?
Oh, no, it just shows both of us. Like it's the same as what's live on the stream right now, but your screen is just black. Oh, that's no good. All right, I'll just pull up your stream and just kind of deal with the delay here.
We have another problem, Johnny. We have the problem back of the sharing violation on path.
Oh no.
Yes, it's back. So maybe
Ruben,
what
what'd
I'm
you
just
do?
gonna do is to remove the temp stuff. I'm not going to delete the whole library bullshit. This really pisses me off, man. Okay, an unexpected error is keeping you from deleting this folder. Okay, so it might. Oh, it's actually not here anymore. Of course, you deleted it. Let's start it again. Okay, so Johnny, in the meantime, I'm going to use the time to ask you questions. So we are going to create a companion entity, right?
Yes.
And you
Yes.
say we call this companion, or rather, you call this companion because, by the way, guys, I hope that you like my background. Addressables, unleash addressables. So we call this companion because it's going to be holding hands with the cubes, correct? Just going to be just together with the cubes, but it's going to be living in the entity world, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So still Unity is complaining.
Yeah, and so I guess I can kind of give a little high level overview on kind of what our next steps are here. But so yeah, basically we're going to be creating a mono behavior that's going to go on every single one of these cubes that we have in our world. And then on start, then we're basically just going to use the entity manager to essentially just create this new companion entity. We're just like creating a new entity from scratch, giving it all the required components that it's going to need. And then we're actually going to go ahead and make that link between the game object and the entity, which is actually really easy to do. It's like literally like 3 lines of code. But yeah, I mean, if you're not like familiar with the entity manager, basically it's just kind of a nice, call it like a tool that we have that, and each one of these entity managers lives within a separate world on the ECS side. And it allows us to do some basic operations against our entities. So we can, create these entities from scratch. We can add components to them, remove components from them. So it is pretty handy. If we were, it does come at a little bit of a cost because some of these operations, especially for making structural changes where we're spawning entities, adding, removing components, and so on, those do take a little bit of a performance hit. So there are some ways to kind of optimize, like when we're inside like an update loop, that we might want to like queue up a bunch of those operations using something like an entity command buffer that still ends up using an entity manager kind of down the line to do all those operations. But the benefit of doing an entity command buffer is we're kind of queuing up all those operations to run them at once rather than running them all over the place. Now, for this case, it's totally fine that we use the entity manager just because we're just doing this once on startup, and it doesn't really matter that it takes a little bit long at the beginning. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump
Working
into this script
after
here.
reopening the project twice. Okay, just think about that next time. Should be super obvious. Just open it twice. Okay.
You restart Unity once, it doesn't work. Try it
Yeah.
again.
Anyway,
Maybe.
so are you okay with the name of Cube Companion Entity? Or I mean, Cube is my use case, but it could also just be
That sounds great to me.
character companion entity to make it less obvious, more obvious actually. So
Yeah.
I'm going to rename this in the script as well, because we do not want to upset Unity. Not anymore. It's been really traumatic already. Okay, so this is my entity. And I assume we need to change something here, right? Does it need to be a structure?
No. This is again,
Right.
this is the mono behavior that we're going to be attaching to our game object, and then here
Okay.
it's going to actually spawn the entity here.
Okay,
All
wait one
right.
second. I have one question here. And
Yeah.
if this is something that we are going to attach to our objects or game object, then shouldn't it be called rather like an authoring script?
So that is a good question, and this
Thank you.
isn't necessarily an authoring script. An authoring script, I mean, you could call it an authoring script if you wanted, but an authoring script are typically going to be attached to game objects that will be converted to entities. And then the
Okay.
authoring script is basically a mono behavior
Okay.
that's going to create either one component or any number of components and add it to that game object that it's on
Yep.
during the conversion process. So yeah.
Okay. Then the only thing I have to say about this is that I might be a bit confused when I read this, when if I read this in the future, because when I see in the file name something like entity, I would expect that to be the entity. But entities, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't sound like they should have a mono behavior on the inside. This is still a good name, you think, right?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, for these purposes is fine. Yeah, we're kind of splitting hairs on the namings of things. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's you know,
Go
just
ahead.
whatever makes sense for your project. But yeah, I think this is fine.
What do we do here?
Yep. So anyways, we can start just in the awake function here. And we're going to go ahead, and first thing that we're going to need is actually a reference to that entity manager. So you can just do inside the awake, just do a var entity manager. And then we'll set this equal to, and again, there's a little bit of a delay. So if I'm going too fast, just let me know to slow down a little bit. But yeah, so you'll say the var entity manager equal to go to the world class. So that's capital W world dot default game object injection world.
Wait. You are too
Yep.
fast. So equals
Equals world with a capital
world.
W, because we want to get the world class, which
And the
is from
default
the
one?
entities library. Dot default
Yep.
game object injection world. You got that?
What a mouthful. Yes, I do.
Okay. So the so the default game object injection world, this is basically it. Yeah, it is completely a mouthful, but it's basically like the default world on the ECS side. That's basically just the easiest way to put that for now. And then do dot entity manager, and that's how we can
Yep.
actually get the entity manager off that.
All right.
Sweet.
I have it.
All right. So now we'll actually go ahead and create our companion entity. So just go down to the next line, and we'll do a var companion entity. And so this is actually going to be of type entity, if you're curious. And then we'll set
I'm
this
curious.
equal. Good. And we'll set this equal to your entity manager, which looks like you just called it EM. So you do a em dot create entity. And then in here, we can basically pass in the components that we want to be part of our entity, essentially by default here. And so basically, there are a couple of ways to do this. Easiest way to do this is to just do like the type of keyword, and then we'll pass in just the type of the different components that we want. So we're just going to need 3 components here to start. So the first one that we're going to want is what is known as a local to world component. So that's local to world, all one word, capitals on LT and W. Basically, this kind of is sort of like the end all be all of like where an entity lives within the game world. It basically tells the rendering engine where to actually render that entity. And so yeah, it's kind of important to have that. But we also have kind of like a number of components that factor into the calculation of the local to world components. So those would be the translation, the rotation, and the scale. So this local to world component, it's a float 4x4 matrix. And basically from that local to world, we can kind of derive the position, orientation, scale, and all that. So
Mhm.
we have um, yeah, so basically we'll also need to add a translation component to that entity. So after the local to world parentheses ends, just go ahead and do a comma and then do another type of translation. And we need this because basically the copy transform from game object system that we're going to be again tapping into is going to write to that translation component. And then after that, there's another built-in system that takes what's in that translation component and it writes it to the local to world component. And then the local to world component, basically tells the entity where to render. In this case, again, we're not rendering anything, but it is still important for us to have that local to world component or else everything breaks.
To have some sort of representation in the world, right? When it comes at least to the position and such. Even if
Exactly.
it's not visible. Something that I found very useful when I was playing around with dots back then was actually to use Rider because it made it super easy to inspect what actually these things are, right?
That's one of the great things about ECS is just like it's basically open source. So you can just kind of F12 into a bunch of the things that they have, check out the source code. It's been super helpful for me, just kind of like figuring out how things work and kind of learning how other things are set up so I can set similar things up in my own code here.
Yeah, exactly. For example, if I didn't have the lag to have you here on this stream, and I would be wondering what's local to wall, right? I could just click here, right? Or in my case, it's control click. And I said, okay, so this is a component. It is a structure. So it's just about holding data. This is the matrix that you were talking about, I assume. And then we just have some operations or just functions that,
they're actually properties. So we can basically, so it's kind of similar to doing like a transform dot forward. So you can just get the forward direction off it. So yeah, definitely handy stuff to have. And then again, you can get the position and rotation from it. So
and for the translation seems to be pretty straightforward. It's a float 3 value, right?
Indeed.
So, what else do we have here?
Okay, so yeah, we just need to add one other thing to our companion entity, and that's actually going to be the, so we'll do another type of, and then this is the copy transform from game object. Now, this is basically just a tag component, so there's no data associated with it. I don't think there's any data associated with it. Actually, you can probably F12 into that one and just make sure and just confirm my sanity here that it's an empty component there.
Yeah, this is interesting because, for example, when I was working on this other game, if you had a tag, we actually put the tag word as a
at the end. That's typically what I do as well.
Okay. But yeah, okay. Empty structure. So I guess that it will be used by some sort of system, right? At some point. Okay.
So yeah, again, we're kind of using this to tap into a built-in system that automatically copies the game objects transform over to the entity's translation component. So those are basically all the essentially ECS components that we need to add to our entity. So you can just close off that line of code there. And then, so right now there is one thing missing, and that's we actually do not have a link between our companion entity and our game object. Now, basically the way that we're going to do this is, again, we're going to use our entity manager. So you can just do a em.
Just one question. Just one question. When you say that, it is because I'm telling Unity or the ECS system, please copy the transform from this game object, right? But I'm not actually telling it from which actual game object.
Right? You don't know where you're copying from. So like you just have that tag, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to the system won't even run because it doesn't have the next necessary component that we're going to be adding. That basically allows us to point to the transform that we want to copy from.
So if I ran this, I would possibly get a debug, like a warning log or something saying, "Ruben, you're stupid," right?
No, that's the great thing about dots is it's just the system's not even going to run. so you won't even know that it's not
No one would
happening.
call me stupid, right? Unity wouldn't say,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
So how do we do this
The
connection
tag
then?
component's an empty component, so it doesn't add any memory cost anyway. So it's zero overhead. But yeah, anyhow, so we actually, the next thing that we need to do is basically we need to add essentially a reference to the translation component that we're going to be mirroring, again, from our game object to our entity. So basically the way that we do that is we have to use this kind of built-in method off the entity manager. So we'll do a em dot, and this is add component object. So
Whoa. Slow it
yeah,
down, baby. I'm asking Unity.
Ooh.
Add component?
Add component object.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay, so object sounds like an object, so reference type, right? I assume
correct.
that this
So
goes
yes,
along these lines.
add component is going to be like adding an ECS component that's just data only. It's limited to all the restrictions for regular ECS components. Whereas the add component object, that's going to be essentially a reference type. Now, again, when we're using these reference types, we're not going to be able to utilize the burst compiler and have to run everything on the main thread. So there are definitely some limitations with using these component objects. So definitely just be aware that there is going to be a little bit of performance overhead by using these.
Who cares about performance, Johnny? Come on, let's go. Let's get this
you
done.
do
This is going to work.
That's literally your business, Ruben.
Okay, so add component objects. I guess that I have to tell it. Okay, I want to
Correct.
add
You pass
an
in the
object.
companion entity, and then yes, the object you're going to be adding is just the transform component off this mono behavior, because again, we're going to be attaching this mono behavior to our game object.
Okay.
And yeah, we want to reference that. So just do lowercase t transform.
Yeah, I have a question here, Johnny. As a person who's not super experienced with dots and this add component object, so I'm asking the entity manager of this specific world to add a reference to the transform of this game object, all clear, into this companion entity. That's
correct.
Good. But if I'm thinking about variables and object-oriented programming, what's the name of this variable, or what's the name of this thing that I'm going to put it there? Because what happens if I do it like 3 times, right? How I'm going to be able to tell off between the different objects that I'm adding, right? I mean, of course, this could be transform 1, transform 2, transform 3. What happens if I did something like this, right? How can I tell them apart? Because this entity would have like 3 transforms in this case.
So I don't think it will actually let you do that. I've actually never tried with component objects. Yeah, I mean, actually, yeah, try that. See what happens. Go back over to Unity, see if it yells at you when you go into...
man, I don't want to upset Unity, man. I learned the lesson before with all these things. I mean, I can try it.
Okay.
But maybe I was, asking if you knew about that out of nowhere, right? Because for me, it's like I'm adding a type transform and an actual reference to a transform, but
yeah.
if I wanted to add
again,
more, right?
I don't think it will let you do that. I know it won't let you do that with like ECS component types. You can't add like multiple ones of the same type to an entity.
Okay.
So I think that same restriction is going to apply for component objects. But I don't think I've actually ever tried that. So
basically, what we could say about this is that we are expected to give it, to give only one reference to this entity of one specific type, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, all clear.
Cool. So yeah, we now have that's basically what we need to set up our companion entity here. So I mean, let's just go back to Unity. Go ahead and drop this component onto your prefab.
Yep. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm not going to drag it. Just going to click here, add component. What was the companion, right?
Yep. Character companion entity is what you called it. Yeah.
It here on my prefab. I'm going to set the spawner to spawn only one. I prefer to see one blue screen rather than 100 blue screens. And actually, is there any reason that I should do this on awake and not on start? This would be like another question that would pop into my head. Okay, so it's just common
Um,
practice.
I I would just prefer to do it in awake just because I would want to have that set up before everything, and then maybe if there's anything that you would need to do, like in start or on like the first update or something like that, then that'll be taken
Okay,
care of.
you already have it set up by then. All right.
Yeah.
Yep. So I have the spawner that's going to spawn one of these cubes or characters, and this has my original LOD system that was taking, let's say, 1 millisecond for 1,000 objects, too expensive. And now it has the new character companion entity that we just created, which just creates an entity, right? And this entity is going to have these components, the usual ones that you see everywhere, translation, local to world and such, but it's also going to have a tag called copy transform from game object, plus a reference to the transform itself, because otherwise the system that takes care of this copy transform from game object is just going to tell me, what the fuck are you trying, man? Is that correct? Is that a good summary?
That sounds beautiful to me.
Okay. So, yeah. What do I do now? Should I just play it and see that nothing happens?
So yeah, that's actually what I was gonna say. I was looking up one quick thing here. Let's do. So yeah, actually, what we can do below that add component object, this would just be something kind of easy for debugging here.
Sure.
We
By
can
the
do
way,
a
there's a question. What happens if the game object is destroyed? Do you need to clean up the entity reference? I know what to say, but I will the expert say that.
yeah, so it's not going to automatically destroy the entity, and it'll still be kind of living in the ECS world. So yeah, that is something that we would want to kind of clean up. So we could probably, if we want to make that companion entity a class scope variable, and then just on destroy, we can just go ahead and destroy the entity. But we can do that later.
And I assume that normally it's fine to leave it to let it live, I guess, in the world and such. But what I would wonder is if we destroy the original object or game object, then this reference or this object that we assigned or added into this entity would be broken, right? Like broken for good, because this game object will be destroyed. Therefore, there should be no transform, right? So
yeah,
in this case, could
you
be
probably get some
problematic.
errors accessing that. But yeah, so the only thing that I wanted to do right now is just do an em dot set name, and then we can just kind of name, and you can just pass in the companion entity, and then just put in a string of companion entity, just so we can kind of see that in our
Is this acceptable for you?
debug window. Stream is a little bit behind, so I can't see, but
Right.
I would assume it is just fine.
I'm sorry,
It's
I had
going em
had to
set
tell
name.
the entity itself, so it's going to be the companion
Passing
entity,
in.
and then give it a name. Is it a good practice actually to maybe just pass the name of the game object or something? Because I guess I will end up with thousands of them. So should it be like individual per entity? Something that I
Yeah, I
pass
mean,
or
you can call it like, you can do like, string interpolation if you want, and say like,
yes.
game object name plus companion or something.
Cool. So I'm just going to set the name or something. I don't know. Possibly it doesn't look good or sexy, but I don't care.
Yeah,
So
that's totally fine.
I never use the set name, but I hope that you show me its actual magic soon.
I will. I will. So yeah, hop back over to Unity,
Yep.
and let's see. You do have this object on your basically cube prefab, right? Or you do have the script on your cube
In
prefab.
my prefab. Yeah, it's in the prefab. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we will get you the dots hierarchy window. So if you go up to window
Yep.
and dots and hierarchy.
Dude, that's new for me. I only use this simple window under analysis, entity
Yeah, you did
debugger,
the entity debugger. Yep.
which is
Yeah.
good.
So this is a new one as of
Woo!
entity 0.50. So it is yeah. I have a whole
So
video on my channel going over the new editor windows, and they're all awesome. So
yeah, you guys should subscribe to his channel. Totally,
everyone makes
it's worth
games.
your time. So I actually started listening to your videos while I ride on the motorcycle. Right, I do not always
Ah,
watch because that would be illegal and
please don't.
dangerous. But I always hear you
Get
like
to your
during the
destination
night,
safely
everything.
and learn about dots there.
Yeah. So which option was it under dots?
Hierarchy.
All right, there it is.
Okay, and then
So
it just shows basically nothing right now, right? It says no
of
world
course,
available.
yep.
Cool. All right. So hit the play mode.
Where do you actually dock the dots hierarchy just to know what looks better, in terms of organization? How do you do it with the?
So I actually have it as another tab on my regular hierarchy, and I just flip back and forth between the two.
Let's do it like that. So hit the play
Yeah, that
button.
works.
Do you mind answering a question that I just
Let's
saw
hear
in
it.
the chat? So
Okay.
if new objects are instantiated, will it still work? Will they be able to register with ECS in real time while the game is already running?
Yep, absolutely. That is a great question, and yeah, basically they will, because that script is going to run. This doesn't necessarily need to like there are some things that happen on ECS at kind of like what they call conversion time, but this is not one of them. This is just like a regular script that's going to, similarly how if you were to spawn a prefab at runtime, its awake method is going to run as soon as you spawn it. The same thing is going to happen here. Its awake method is going to run. It's going to get a reference to that entity manager. It's going to spawn the entity and so on. So yeah, that's totally going to work just fine.
Thank you, Johnny.
Yep.
Send him some gold, man. Buy him a drink. Anyway, coming back to this topic, it is in play mode.
Okay.
Let me go to dots hierarchy
Yep.
because I have my cube, so I expect to see one entity at least. And there we go, my cube clone. Nice. Wow, it's actually different from the other entities debugger window, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really nice. And actually, yeah, you can click on that and you can see what components are on it in the inspector.
It even shows a reference to the transform.
Indeed, it does.
So if I click here, wow, it actually
Yep.
highlights
So yeah,
the
you can
cube
see
itself.
over on the side. Yeah, you can see over on the side we have the tags at the top. So that's our copy transform from game object tag. You also have the translation tag, which is right now just 000. And then you do also have your local to world component as well. Now,
What does it
it's
know
a
it's
little
a
bit.
tag? Is it because it's empty?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, yep, you do have your reference to your MyCube transform.
Yep. It even highlights the reference, which is pretty damn good. And
I know, it's nice. And yeah, you can actually edit the values inside the inspector now. So,
wait, so now let me
although
actually try this.
it's not gonna do anything.
Wait, but if I move the cube, I would expect this to be always following it, right?
Yes, and you should see that update if you move the cube.
Yeah, it does. Nice. So I actually just added a tag to ask ECS or one specific, let's say, library or module of ECS, whatever, to please
So
copy the
actually,
transform.
we can actually go into that, and I'll show you where you can see that, like
Yep.
the actual system that it's running against. So again, go up to Window
Dots.
and Dots, and then Systems.
I'm running out of space.
And then I docked this one to my console.
But I actually did it right. Such a pro. Okay. And then I guess I can just open them. Yep. I see already some stuff. For example, on update, I have the simulation system group, which
Yep.
is
So you
living in the
see one
default
that's
world.
yeah, inside the simulation system group, there will be the transform system group.
Yes.
And in there, you'll see the copy transform from game object system.
Yep.
And so you can actually click on that. You'll see how many entities are basically being affected by that system on the entity count column. And then past that, you'll actually see the time in milliseconds about how long that system is taking.
2 entities. Why is that the case? I expected to see only one.
Let me see. So actually, if you click on the system, you can see over in the inspector, it'll tell you what queries.
Yep. There's some type of
And
entity that only has a local to world component. I mean, it's not important. Maybe it's something from Unity, but
yeah, I think there must be another system in there or something, but yeah, because there's 2 queries happening in there. But you should see under query number 2, there should be that one companion entity.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I cannot see the name of the entity, right? I wish I could.
So where it says query 2,
Yeah.
go all the way to the right, and then there's that like kind of like Windows icon, and it'll
So
pop open the
bottom.
query window.
Yeah, this is my entity. Nice. No, my cube. Yeah. Says the components and also the entities.
Yep.
Super handy. So I guess I could also do the same for the query number 1 and see. Oh, it's actually on the companion entity as well, my cube. All right. It's working on the same entity for some reason. Let's assume that's intended. That's what I always do when I have no idea about something.
Sounds good to me. All right. Well, so yeah, now we have the basic companion entity spawning, and it's copying its transform from the game object here. So now what we can actually go ahead and do is basically create now our LOD system. So,
do you mind if I do profiling on this with 100? I'm just curious about the cost
go
of
ahead.
the system.
Yeah. Let's kind of see what we're at.
So 100 entities, and it should be copying here. So entity count is 200. It's actually duplicating it. Okay, maybe it's the way that the system works, so it's fine. But
I think again, it's because I think it's that 2 queries. It just adds those both together.
Gotcha. So because the system might have 2 queries, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So yeah, it's 0.04. Basically, just copying the transforms from the game object to the entity components, I assume. And
again, there is going to be a little bit of inefficiencies there because it cannot take advantage of multi-threading nor the burst compiler.
And not even for the copy transform, right?
That's correct, because it needs a reference to the transform component, which is a managed component.
We do not like transform or any type of reference types.
No.
Okay, and I actually can see this on the profiler as well, right? I see the copy transforms from game object system in the usual profiler. And I can see that the job system is pretty busy. So might actually be still doing some stuff in parallel. Maybe something different. Stash transforms with burst. Okay. Well, sounds it is doing already a bit better. So what do we do now?
All right. So yeah, now the next thing that we're going to actually do is we're just kind of go ahead and creating our LOD, basically the calculation system. So this is basically where we are going to be referencing some specific points, and then doing some distance calculations against that to determine, whether we're within that particular range or greater than that particular range. So
Okay. So what do I create?
okay, so yeah, trying to think about how exactly we want to do this, how we would want to reference a particular point. So I guess we could have maybe it's just like a super hacky way to do this, but it'll be easy because again, we're just referencing against the camera, right?
Yep.
So I think what we can do is we'll go ahead and create a new system.
Right.
And yeah, you can do a new ECS system. That's fine.
How do we
And
call
then
this?
I guess basically at the beginning, we'll just go ahead and get a reference to the camera's translation. And then before we do our entities.for each, we'll just yank a float3 position out of that. And then we can compare against that. So that'll be fine.
Okay. How do we name this system?
Let's go ahead and call this the like check LOD distance system or something.
Right.
Sorry if I bumped the mic there.
Yeah, I sometimes do it when I get frustrated as well. Just punch it.
Yeah, I'm very frustrated right now, as you can tell. No.
So okay, so Unity created class coming from system base, and then it's overriding the update
and you do
function.
have a partial. It is a partial class, right?
Mm-hmm. Why is it partial?
Yep. So that is a new way that we need to do things as per the entities 0.50 version. And actually, a little side note, that thing that we were doing before we went live here today, where you had those errors and you had to say add partial keywords to systems. Basically, that's kind of like an automated thing that adds that partial keyword to any system you have in your project. And so, yeah, for some reason, right out of the box, sometimes it doesn't have the partial keywords in every system. So you just, enable that setting and you're good to go.
Okay.
So, yeah, so anyhow, I just say, yeah, go ahead and just clear out everything inside that on update function. We don't really need any of that. So yeah, first we'll do a class scoped variable here. And you can just make this a Unity engine translation component.
You mean to create a variable here on the class level?
Yes.
Okay, so you want that public. Just let me know what you want me to write.
It can be a private variable.
Okay.
And it'll be a transform component, just Unity engine.transform. And then you can just call that camera transform or whatever you want to call basically
reference
your
point.
target transform. All right. And then now the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to actually get a reference to that basically when the system starts running. And so they're basically, it's kind of similar to like a Unity mono behavior where there are like two different methods to start a system. So there's like the on create and there's also the on start running. So on create is kind of similar to like the awake. It's going to happen, very early on before everything else. On start running is kind of like a combination of the start function as well as the on enable function. Because every time you say disable the system and re-enable it, that on start running system is going to run again. Okay. The on create will only ever run once, basically when it creates. So we're actually going to be doing this in the on start running. The reason that we need to do this way is because actually it might still work in on create, but we'll just do it in the on start running anyhow. Sometimes when we're dealing with things in the game object world or things during the conversion process, we won't actually be able to get a reference to that in the on create. So we'll just do it in the on start running. And that's totally fine if we just, grab a new reference to the transform when this system gets re-enabled if it were to ever get disabled for some reason. So on start running is totally fine.
I don't have to call the base, right? That's just
Nope.
from right.
And actually, if you F12 into the base.on start running, literally nothing is in there. So you can just go ahead and take that out.
All right. So I just
So
need
then,
to
yeah,
grab a
just set
reference, right?
reference point equal to, camera.main.transform. No way, bad boy. What?
All right. So there we have it. That looks
Crack me
quite
up, Ruben.
similar to what I had here, right? The reference point, just grabbing that.
Yep.
Although
Literally
I'm
the
not
same
being
thing, just grabbing the reference.
I'm not being super consistent with my naming conventions because just because. Okay.
That's fine. We're live.
So we're ready. We have
Okay.
the transform.
Beautiful. Okay, so now in our on update, before your entities.for each, okay, I see it. You flipping back there. So yeah, before your entities.for each, we're gonna go ahead and grab basically the transform's position, and we want to store this in a float 3. A float 3 is basically just kind of a type part of the unity.mathematics library, and this really allows us to take advantage of the burst compiler much better. So yeah, you do a float 3, and then you can just call that reference position, and then you just set that equal to reference points dot position, and that should just automatically convert the vector 3 position into a float 3.
And I have to say that this is already much better, right? Because I assume that we have the system running only once, right? This update is going to run only once per frame. That's what I assume. And therefore, we are just accessing the camera, the position itself, and the transform once per frame. That's my assumption, okay? It might be incorrect. While in the original, my dummy LOD system, we were accessing the position of the camera every single frame X amount of times, right? If I had 1,000 entities, then I would do these
Yes.
1,000 times.
Yes.
Which is
So
one
yeah,
of the expensive parts.
there are a couple things that I do want to point out. One of them being what you just said right there, where basically we're getting this reference once for every single essentially companion entity in the project. So that is a major bonus right there. The other thing that I should point out is, again, I mentioned that basically reference types like these transforms, we can only use them on the single thread without the burst compiler and all that, which in this case is totally fine because inside the on update function of these systems, all that stuff is going to run on the main thread anyhow without the burst compiler. When we actually go to create a job, which we're going to do in the entities.for each, that is when we have to start considering the optimizations of like multi-threading, enabling the burst compiler and all that. So that's kind of where we need to be cautious about these things. Right now, just everything in the on update function, that's all going to be running on the main thread without burst. But we're going to be essentially scheduling jobs inside that on update function so that they can actually run multi-threaded without the burst compiler at a later point in the frame, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense indeed.
So yeah, I just kind of wanted to point that out. So yeah, now we're actually just about ready to kind of do our entities.for each here. So
just one thing, Johnny, I have to say, because I was not sure when I was saying this, okay, and maybe I just made it up. I just had the feeling that the on update is going to be called only once per frame, but I don't know how Unity actually does this. Is it guaranteed to be called once per frame, everything that I just put here, or it might be that Unity calls this several times per frame depending on what you do with tags, components, or whatever. If you do something like in between the frame or something, does this have an impact on how many times this on update is called?
Yeah, good question. So the on update is only going to be called once and only once every single frame. Basically, there are different kind of like system groups, and when we're back over in Unity looking at the systems window, it has all these different groups, and then basically that like parent group, every single frame it's going to run through kind of like the high level parent groups, and then inside, and then those parent groups are actually what call the on update function for each of those system bases. And it just kind of runs them top to bottom in the order that is displayed in the systems window. And then yeah, maybe if we get into it a little bit later, we can talk about system update order and all that.
Yeah, I ask because I'm always trying to be careful with the stuff that could go wrong, and I can assume that in the worst case scenario, if I add one tag or one component too late in the frame, it might be that the job system, sorry, that ECS does not execute that until next frame, right? That doesn't execute the code here, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of where you gotta
Be careful about it.
start considering system update order and
Okay.
yeah, when components get added to entities and so on.
Right. What do we do?
Okay. I need to clear my
Go ahead.
throat real quick. Hold
No
on.
worries. Get some vodka. I already have it here. Cheers, guys.
Okay. I think I'm better now. So yeah, we're actually going to need to add one other component to our companion entity. And this is basically just going to be, yeah, we can do it this way. This is basically going to be a way that we can, set like our target distance of, how far away that it's going to be when it's going to turn our rendering off. So it actually probably the
Johnny,
easiest.
could we hard code it to 10 for now, or should we go,
Yeah, so
do
we
it
can
for
hard
steps?
code it to 10 for now. That's fine.
Okay. I just
So
want to see something running right on the profiler and make sure that I'm doing something that eventually could work.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll still need to add a component to our companion entity. I think we can just add like a tag component. Actually, you know what? We'll just use the copy transform from game object tag because that we already know is on that entity.
Sneaky.
Yeah. So what you're gonna do is after the entities, do another dot. And
where? Sorry, after the entities.
Okay, so line 22, like literally right after the word entities.
Yep. Dot.
You're gonna do another dot, and then do a dot with all.
All right.
And then inside the type brackets there, we can just put our type that we're going to be adding into that query, which is the copy transform from game object. And so again, this is where, if we had maybe a specific tag that would have said, we want to apply LOD filtering to this, we would have a specific type. We would add that tag in when we create our companion entity, and then we could filter for it right here. In this case, we know there's, the entities that we already have are going to have that copy transform from game object. So we're going to go ahead and have that in there. And this is just so we can kind of like, filter out all the kind of unneeded entities, essentially.
I guess that in production, we really want to add a tag or even just some component, right? Because this
and that's what I was going to say at first, is that we would actually have maybe a data component, and then that data component could store, the specific distance of how far away that we would be in order to disable rendering.
All right.
Okay. So yeah, right down there where it says the ref translation in rotation, just go ahead and delete that. Just go ahead and keep those parentheses and everything though.
Like this, remove everything within the for each, right?
Yep. And then, so yeah, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be reading from the translation components. And yeah, that's actually, I think, all we need, right? Because we're just doing a comparison of where the translation is versus where the reference position is. And then we're just doing a hard-coded distance check.
Yep. And how do we get the translation? I mean, we just deleted that from the for each, I think.
Yep. So yeah, the reason that I did that is because the translation that it had there was a ref to the translation, which means you have read and write access to the translation. So we only need read-only access. I'm probably not going to get into it too much because I know we've kind of been code a little while for just get this set up right now. But there are some efficiencies for making it a read-only component. So The way we make it read only is we just say in, and then we do the translation, and you can just call that lowercase d translation. And so, yeah, that in keyword is the thing that makes it a read only, whereas the ref keyword is a read and write access.
Makes sense.
All right. And then, so yeah, once you have that, now we can actually go into your body of that Lambda function there in between the curly braces. And then here's where we're actually going to be doing our distance calculation here. And so this is actually on the new Unity mathematics library. And so basically we just do, it's actually a lowercase m is the class, and then just do a math.distance.
Yep, I can see that it's already taking the float3 stuff that we have lying around already, right?
Yep, and then just go ahead and drop in your reference position, and then you'll also have to do you'll pass in the translation, but you can't just pass in the translation component because, or if you just pass in translation, that's the like actual ECS data component. So you have to do translation dot value, and the dot value actually gets you the float3 position that we're going to be comparing against.
You guys remember that you can always peek into the source code, right? If there are questions about that. And then I need to just pass the reference position, okay? And this gives me the distance, right?
Yep, and that returns your distance. So yeah, you can store that in a variable, and then we can maybe just like do a hard-coded test against our result there.
Yep. So yeah, actually, let me just do this. Boolean. I'm gonna actually copy what I had before. Boolean too far away. Distance is beyond 10 meters. And then this is the line that I'm missing, Johnny. How do I make a mesh renderer that enabled equals something?
Yep, that is a great question. So again, we're going to be doing this in a separate system. Now, the reason that we're doing it in a separate system, again, is because this is where we start having to consider like using, making sure that we're, well, because we want to ideally multi-thread this, run it with the burst compiler. If we were to access the mesh renderer, which, we could, if we have, again, a component object reference, which I think we still end up needing to set up anyways, we would not be able to use, we would have to run this on the main thread without the burst compiler, which again, really just kind of eliminates a lot of the efficiencies that we have.
Type.
Again, yes, because it is a reference type. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, I think the way that we can, so there are kind of a couple ways that we can go about doing this. One of them is through tagging, and one of them would be through flagging. Now, tagging would be, we add specific components to an entity, and then that can kind of tell us whether the rendering should be enabled or disabled. Whereas flagging would basically just be like setting a Boolean value, true, true or false, and then we'd have a follow-on system, check that, and so on. I think in this case, tagging would probably be the best way to go. Reason is because I wouldn't expect in this particular case entities, very like a large number of entities very frequently changing between the should render and should not render state. If that were the case where we're having entities that were like frequently transitioning between states, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, that's going to start getting pretty expensive. Just adding the components and removing them.
One thing, Johnny, is it possible that we do this in the main thread and doing stuff here to keep it simple, take some measures and say, okay, this is bullcrap. Let's improve it further with the flagging technique, for example, or whatever that you recommend. is it possible just to do this kind of line of code somehow, just to make sure that what we want to do actually works still, even if it's running on the main threads, sequentially and such? Or is it a lot of overhead?
To do what part exactly on the main
Yeah,
thread,
to
you mean?
actually do this here, the mesh renderer
The
enable
mesh renderer
that.
enable?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
actually, yeah. Let's go ahead and do that. Might
Nice.
as well. So jump back over to your character companion entity script.
Yep.
And so we're actually going to need to get the mesh renderer. So
Let me guess.
yeah,
I'm
you're going to
going
do
to try
something
to
very
be
similar. It's not loaded on
smart
my end
here.
yet, but you're going to do something very similar where you just do the add component object, again, adding to the companion entity, and then get component mesh renderer.
Yep. So that will be enough, right? The add component object, companion entity, and then just get component mesh renderer. Of course, we are kind of, assuming that this is all in the same object and such. Okay, we are kind of ignoring all these safety protocols. But
Yeah,
is this
yeah.
the main idea, right? To have this line
Yep.
of
Again,
code.
just simple high level overview. Yep.
Okay. So we
Yep.
are
That looks
adding a
great to
new
me.
reference, which would be a mesh renderer.
Yep.
And I
Indeed.
assume that's enough for the entity to have that reference and that we can now use it here in the for each loop.
Yep. So yeah, now we'll go back over to our system. And then here we'll actually, so yeah, what we end up doing is kind of similar to, in the entity step for each, we're going to actually add another variable in their query there. So this would actually need to go before the translation. And because it is a component object, I'm pretty sure, if I remember off the top of my head here, we don't need to add the ref or in keywords because it's basically a component object reference type.
Have any tip for people like me who always forget the order to put stuff on the for each, like
Yeah.
in ref and all of this?
I don't know, maybe print something out on a sheet of paper or something. But yeah, so yeah, basically the way that it needs to be is there are kind of some special variables that go very first, and we're going to be adding one of those a little bit later here. After that, you're going to add all your reference types, which you shouldn't really be using reference types if you can, but you're going to have those first. So you have, in this case, mesh renderer. After that, you're going to need, everything that has read and write access. So everything with the ref keyword. And then at the very end, you do anything with the in keyword last.
Yeah, I guess that's just
So it's kind of like
me
special
studying that.
variables, reference types, read and write access, read only access. It's kind of like a hierarchy there.
I will write that piece of paper later on. Maybe that works.
There you go.
And that's it.
Yeah. So then you can basically just do the mesh renderer dot enabled equals close enough.
Now you are setting me up for a trap. This is going to explode, right?
This is going to explode, right?
I'm not able to call the schedule on this thing, right? Because the schedule
Go
is
ahead and go
going
back
to.
to Unity and just show the errors that we get, because I think this would be helpful for people.
All right, let's go to the console. Entities for each is using managed iComponent data mesh renderer. Okay, so the mesh renderer is a component in Unity which is managed. It's a reference type, and ECS, well, it's just gonna call it dots, doesn't like it when I try to schedule a job with this kind of managed data, apparently, right? This is only supported when using both without burst and run. So I guess this is kind of telling me what I need to do, right?
Yep. So in that case, this is a fairly clear error message about what you need to do. So it says you are using this mesh renderer, which is a managed type, and it's not allowed to schedule or use the burst compiler. So again, we'll just have to go back over to Unity, change the change the dot schedule to a dot run, and you also will need to add in the dot without burst as another parameter there.
Okay, it's done. Let's see if Unity likes it more now. Well, there's no more error in the console, so that's already a start. And I start to feel the itch to click on the play button. May I do that, Johnny?
Let it rock.
Okay. So, just for anybody who is jumping in right now on the stream or something, uh, the summary of this is that I have a spawner that spawns multiple objects or prefabs or instances or whatever, right? And I have right now, I'm going to have 10 of these game objects, right? What we are going to do is to create one companion entity, which is basically an abstract kind of entity that is going to be holding hands with my cubes, right? The cubes that are traditionally living in Unity as game
That's a cute way
objects.
to put it.
Yeah, just call it hand holder instead of companion. And we are making sure that the entities are following these cubes because we added this component called copy transform from game objects. And which transform is it going to be? Well, we just pass the transform of this game object itself, right? We just add a reference to that in the entity that's going to be holding hands with our cube. Okay. And the last thing we did is basically just to calculate some distances, right? We do not use the cube anymore. Here we are just working with the entity that contains the updated transform, the updated position. And what we're going to do is, depending on this distance, we are just going to activate or rather enable or disable the mesh renderer component, which is a pity, because it is a reference type and we cannot make this ultra efficient because, yeah, it's a reference type. So
Yeah, no, I think that's a great summary of what we have so far. So, yeah, I mean, let's head back over to Unity. Let's kind of just confirm everything is working here. Do a little sanity check, and then we can do kind of some performance metrics on here, and just kind of see where we're at.
this is very interesting because if I disable these cubes, these things are the systems are going to still be running onto these entities. But anyway, it's fine. I'm just going to use one cube to visually see this. I'm going to be moving the cube, which is here. And then I should be able, if I learned things correctly, to go to dots hierarchy and find a cube that is right now setting at 0, 0, 0, right? So I just go around here, and it's actually the first one.
You actually go ahead and move the game object cube.
Yep, let me set at set number, set at 1, and I should be able to see it updated right here. It is, yeah, in the dots hierarchy. I'm seeing the entity that is holding hands with my cube sitting at set 1. So
Okay.
this is looking good. Now the question is, what happens if we go beyond 10 meters, right? If we did things right, it should just disappear. If not, I will just end the stream and give up game development forever. Okay, we are approaching the limit.
Good run, Ruben.
Woo! And it's not working. Okay, shit. And now I have to give up game development. All right, let me check a few things. The camera is sitting at, while it's 1, 0, 0, 0. And then, yep, apparently we are not turning off the mesh renderer. Any ideas why?
Okay, so the game object is past the 10, right?
Yep, it is at 20.
Okay, go to your companion entity. I think that it might not be updating the transform component properly for some reason, or the translation component.
Yeah. So this is a good use case for learning how to debug these things. For example, I would just do a sanity check, right? The mesh renderer seems like it is correctly assigned to this mesh renderer, right? I just click here and it's highlighted here. The transform is also this cube itself. What of course I need to still be checking is whether we got the right transform, right, of the camera or the reference point. But right now I cannot do that because it's a private thingy, right? I think we left. Yeah.
So actually, yeah, I wonder if this might be what actually is going on. If because it doesn't look like the translation component is actually being updated. I think maybe that copy transform from game object is just writing directly to the local to world.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. I actually missed that part. I was just checking the local to world. Okay, and here it looked okay, I think, or
Because
no,
yeah,
not even that
if
one.
we look at the query
Yeah,
for the copy transform from game object system, it's actually writing to it has read and write access to the local to world.
yeah, and look, it is correct in the local to world, but it's not in the
Yeah,
translation itself. Okay,
yeah.
so what do we do about
So
this?
yep. So we'll go back to our system, and instead of getting an in on the translation in the entity set for each, just change that type to a local to world type. And then where you access the translation dot value, or yeah,
Yep.
where you access the translation dot value, just go ahead and change that to local to world dot position, or whatever you have the local to world variable named as.
That should work, I assume,
Yeah.
because the data was correct in the editor. Although I would still be internally wondering if that's the thing. Why is the translation not updated? I guess because the system does not update the translation.
Yeah, I don't think it actually cares about the
Okay.
yeah, it's just yeah,
You
it's
know what? You know what? This will be a really good moment to actually check it, right? I guess I could just go to Rider, and there must be some type of copy transform from game object system. And let's hope that it's not too complex, because if it is complex, I'm just gonna say, okay, sure, whatever. And here we have quite a few lines of code. Okay, so we have a partial class, which is a system base, internal structure, stash transforms,
yeah, the
blah, blah,
the
blah.
translation stuff, it's really good to learn from, but it is fairly complicated. There's some kind of things going on there, so we don't have to get into that right now.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I found this, right? It is just updating the local to world in this case.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, I guess we can also do it that way, just the local to world. And we compile that. And
Yep. So yeah, I guess
hopefully-
I misspoke a little earlier when I said that it copied to the translation, but looks like it just copies to the local to world, so that is totally fine.
So there's one question. Do debug log functions work from within the ECS code to print out errors to the console?
That's a good question, and yes, they do. You do have to use the string interpolation with them, so you do the $sign, quotation marks, and all that, and then you can basically print out any kind of log messages. I think internally what happens is it kind of converts it to what is known as a fixed string type. So they have these special classes inside Unity ECS where it's there'll be like a fixed string 64 or something like that. So it means that's a 64 bit or byte string. And then, so yeah, it basically blocks off a chunk of memory. So you can kind of use the debug messages with the burst compiler and all that. So yeah, it does work.
In the past, I remember that there was a limitation that this kind of stuff, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I forgot or something like this, only worked if you were doing like a run, but didn't particularly work well if you did a scheduled parallel or something like this.
Right. Yeah. It does work. So, yeah.
It does work on parallel as well.
Correct. Yes.
All right. So with that burst run, I guess we can run it right on Unity and see.
Let's make it happen.
Okay. So let me find the cube. But this leaves me with a bad taste in the mouth to see, the translation not being really synchronized with the local to world component.
Yeah,
Not
I
if you
know
know
why
what I mean.
that's happening. It's watch my video on how transforms work in Unity ECS, and it maybe will make a little more sense. But yeah, the transforms are a little bit of a complex topic, but they're fun.
So let's see. The limit 9.9 and 11. Well, it's gone. Working, man.
Hey, and if you come back,
Yep, it is working as expected. So
beautiful,
now I'm going to
and
spawn
you should be able to move the
100.
camera too, and it would do the same
Yeah,
culling.
actually, yeah, that's possibly the smarter way of doing it. So let me just move the camera. There we go. It's amazing, man.
It is amazing.
Let's just upload this to the asset store and sell it for 20 bucks. Okay,
Talk
so
LOD system.
so let's see the profiler because I'm always curious about the profiler.
Yeah, what are we at?
By the way, if you are profiling on the editor, the first player loop part is usually code, and the second one is tends to be rendering itself. Okay, it's separated by the editor loop, which is it's not showing you anything on purpose because it doesn't want to pollute you with details that are not important. If you are really cared about what is going on here, you could always profile the editor as well, but that's normally not really required, right? It's just going to be noise. So in this case, we are doing the update run behavior. Do I actually still run the old script? Did I just remove it in the past? I didn't remove it. That would be pretty lame, actually. Yes, I think it would be a better start to actually remove it from my prefab, right? This one, right? Just to make sure I'm not crazy, man. Sometimes I really doubt if I am crazy.
My dummy LOD system.
My dummy LOD system, yeah. So maybe it actually never worked. So let's see. No, I think it actually looks good. So let's move the camera again. So there we go. It's still working. So whoosh, I was starting to sweat, man. All right. So let's go to the profiler again and keep recording. And now that cost should be gone from the behavior updates group. And now we should only have the check LOD distance system, which is our code, right? And then of course we also have the other code from Unity. The system like is the copy transform from game object system. Okay, everything is looking good so far. And we're asking Unity to run this sequentially, right? Because of this schedule. No, sorry, was it because of run?
Yep,
And
we're running it on the main thread. So yeah, basically what that's going to do is it's going to just high level on that system is it's going to filter out everything with those particular components that we have defined, and it's going to basically just has like a collection of those, and it runs through them in order. There are many efficiencies with the ECS system that basically group those things all together in memory. So like literally we're just going to one section of memory, and we're just going to be able to run right through all those. So it's a big efficiency gain right there.
let's actually compare it. I know it's not what we should be doing, right? To have these two systems running at the same time, but why not, man? Let's actually have them both and then just compare it face to face for 1,000 objects, okay? So record, okay? Enough. Enough is enough. So here we have the behavior update with 1,000 game objects being called on the update function, right? And here we see a huge chunk of 1.74 milliseconds. Remember, the code is pretty simple, right? But sometimes simple doesn't mean easy. And we're just doing calculating the distance and then changing the mesh renderer enable flag. And that's taking 1.7 milliseconds. And then on the right side, we have the, in theory, slightly better way of doing this, even though this is still sequential. Right? We run a system where we kind of do the same, only that we save on a few things. And we can already tell that by checking the cost, right? It's 1.7, the old one, versus 0.7 or 75 in total, okay, of both systems. So this is already a pretty big gain, I have to say, even if we are running this on the same thread, okay, sequentially. So in this case, thank you, Johnny. That's really already very helpful.
You got
right?
it.
But we are not done, right, Johnny?
Oh,
Tell me why. What's wrong with this?
okay. So basically, what is happening right now is we're running this whole job again on the main thread without the burst compiler. Really, the main point of this whole video that we've done so far is we want to do our distance calculation, which is fairly expensive, but it is just kind of a basic, more or less basic math operation. So kind of the optimization that we want to make is to be able to run this distance calculation on all our entities, basically be able to run those in parallel. So we're not doing, one distance calculation, another distance calculation, another distance calculation, waiting for our main thread to do all that stuff. Let's actually go ahead and split this out across, all Ruben's 32 threads that he has available to him.
Is this why it looks so empty here, Johnny?
Yeah.
Job
You'll see that.
category?
Yeah, nothing. There's nothing in that whole job area right there.
All right.
So yeah, basically that'll be the first thing that we want to do, and then the other thing is we do also want to use the burst compiler. The burst compiler is fairly complex how it works under the hood, but it is more or less simple in the fact of the way that you use it is if you can use simple data types, just kind of floats, integers, things of that nature. It can kind of like compress that data and do the math operations much more efficiently. So what we're going to do here is basically break our system up. So we're doing one system with all the complex distance calculations and everything like that, which is going to be able to take advantage of multi-threading as well as the burst compiler. And then we're going to have another system that is actually going to be, it's the one that's going to run on the main thread without burst, which actually, enables or disables the rendering.
Sounds good. Do you have time for a question there I saw?
Yeah.
First is, what is Johnny's channel? So that's not really a question for you, but I'm just going to find the link to your YouTube channel and put it in the chat. The second one is, so do you still need to pass the reference to the transform in the entity itself? I assume he means this one. And I'm going to find your link to your channel in a minute.
Yep, just Turbo Makes Games. If you look for any dots or ECS videos, you'll come across my channel very quickly. But
I put it in the channel.
So yes. To answer the second question, yes, you do still need to pass in that translation reference, or the transform reference rather, because that copy transform from game object still needs a reference to the original translation to copy over to our local to world. Again, without that, we're just not going to have that reference, and it wouldn't know where to copy from, basically.
So I guess that we can say that this screenshot says it all, right? Actually, the other way around, right? Should be more like the system requires this transform, right, to work. But not sure if you see it. Anyway, not important. Let's keep going.
So yeah, the thing I don't think we actually need, but we can just still leave it in, is fine, is the type of translation on the companion entity, because that's basically not doing anything.
Remove that.
But yeah, that's fine. We can just keep it on for now. We don't want to instantly break anything. Your stream is catching up. I have no idea what you're doing with these emojis and
wow, I made that like 30 seconds ago. All right.
Yeah, refresh this, yeah.
Okay, so I left the translation component just not to break anything, but I get it that in theory we just do not need it because it was
Yeah,
not even
yeah, yeah.
updated anyway, right? From the copy transform. So how do we split the job, this stuff into a different job and such?
Yes. All right. So go over to our system here. You're probably on it, but the stream isn't caught up for me. So yeah, basically what we're going to do is, I think the way that we're going to do this is we're going to have a couple of different tag components that we're going to need to either add or remove to the entity at different points in our code. So basically, I think what we should do here is we will have we'll start with a tag by default that'll be on every single companion entity, which is renderer enabled. And then so we can just basically filter for every entity that has the renderer enabled. We'll also have another one for renderer disabled. So, we can look for anything that has its renderer disabled. And then we're also going to have a third tag, and this one's going to be basically added or removed, which is just kind of the change renderer state. So let's say that we have an entity that has the render enabled tag, and then we add the change renderer state. Well, then we can have a system that runs off of everything that has its render enabled and it has that change render state. We can actually go ahead and disable the mesh renderer and then basically change the tags around. So now we take off the render enabled, we'll add the render disabled, and then we'll also remove that change render tag because we just need that for that one frame that it changes. So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, totally. I guess that these tags we need to create, right? There is nothing already
Yes,
coming
we'll
from
need to create our tags. Let's actually go ahead and do this just on the character companion entity script. That's just like an easy enough place to do those.
Normally in production, we would need to create one file for each tag, right? But that takes quite a long time.
You don't need to. I'd say it's best practice to have one component per file. There is one little wrinkle in there, which is where if we were using the authoring workflow, where if we want to say drag this component onto a game object that's going to be converted at runtime, there is a convert what is it now, generate authoring component attribute that you can add to those components, and only one of those work per file. So you can't have like multiple components with that attribute in them.
Okay, but we're gonna do it here because it's going to be faster and everything, right?
Yep. So yeah, this is going to be outside the class. Just go ahead and create a public struct, and we'll just call this render enable tag, or render enabled tag.
Component data, right?
Implement iComponent data. And again, it's just an empty tag. So just, open and close your curly braces. You basically do the same thing with renderer disabled. And then we can just do like another one, which would be like the change render state tag.
Okay, yes, one question about this. Is it better in terms of performance to have 3 tags that are empty? Or, for example, if I mixed or joined the first 2 ones by adding a Boolean, right? For example, render state, and then just having a Boolean, whether that's true or false. I'm not sure if you know what I mean.
Yep, I know exactly what you mean. So it really depends on kind of how you're implementing this project. In this particular case, I find it better to have separate tags so we can have basically like separate queries to kind of like filter out for what is enabled and what is disabled, and then that way we're not actually like going through and doing checks inside of our systems to see whether exactly, because
I get your point.
we could end up in a situation where maybe only one entity falls under one particular category, but we still have to go through every single one and check to see whether it has that particular thing or not. So I'd say in general for data-oriented design, it is better to, use different components to kind of like filter out like where like what properties or whatever a component has, just because it saves us some optimizations down the line. Again, it is going to be a little bit expensive to add and remove these tags very frequently. So, there are some cases where you might have to do a little bit of a cost benefit analysis to determine whether it's better to use tags or the conditional operations.
Okay, makes sense. So I guess that we can also assume, to simplify things, that I can just add the renderer enabled tag by default when I create the entity, although that also depends on the position.
Yeah, so we'll add the render enabled tag by default, and then basically the system's just going to run first, and if it's outside of that, then it's gonna change the rendering.
Okay, so I added that in the create entity function just at the end after the copy transform from game object. Is that correct?
Beautiful. Yep.
Okay, and now?
Okay, so now we'll come over to our system, and we're actually going to need to kind of break this out into a couple different systems. So basically, one's going to be kind of our distance checking system. The next one's going to be, and then I think we're just gonna have two systems, or so we'll have one distance checking system, one enable rendering system, and then one disable rendering system.
All right. So how do we do that?
Okay, so one thing that we are going to need is what is known as an entity command buffer. Now, I guess in the interest of time, we can kind of just do this sort of the easy way here. So after you get the reference position, we'll go ahead and create a new entity command buffer.
Yep.
So just say like var ECB equals new entity command buffer. And then inside there, we have to pass in the allocator. And this is just going to be an allocator.temp job.
Done. Yeah, I mean, I would have questions about that, but maybe we can keep going forward. Maybe later we'll have time for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can go into on entity command buffers. I have a video on the channel going into kind of how to use them and a better way that we can do them than just because we're just this is fine for now.
So ECB.
Yep. So we have our ECB. Okay. So now what we're going to do is again we'll first do our distance checking system. And so we can just kind of refactor this existing one that we have right now. So our entities.withall, copy transform from game object. So go ahead and remove the mesh renderer.
By the way, can I actually give this system a name or something? Because if we are going to create more systems, it would be good to have it documented both in code and maybe in the system debugger or visualizer.
That is a great question, and you can do that. So just kind of like similar how you're doing a dot with all, you can do a dot with name, and then in there you can pass in the name of the job. Now you can't use any like spaces or anything like that, but you can use underscores if you want.
And we're going to call this distance calculator. Okay, something like this.
Yep.
So I removed the mesh renderer because, of course, we don't need an the access to that. We just need the position, right? And that way, eventually, we will be able as well to run this in parallel, right? Because if we left the mesh renderer, this is kind of a reference type, and that would not allow us to run this in parallel. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, also we are going to need a reference to the entity itself. So this is kind of one of those like special parts of the entities.forEach function that I was referencing a little bit earlier. So this needs to go before anything else in your for each query here. So basically you'll just do pass in the type of entity, which is capital E. and then you can just call it entity, companion entity, whatever you want.
Oh, actually, I think that's amazing to call it companion entity.
Yeah, just it's a little more clear. But yeah, so that's basically a reference to this particular entity that we're kind of iterating across at that given point in time.
And nope.
Okay, so now what we're going to do, so we'll go ahead and do our distance calculation, and then so we'll say, let me think how we want to do this.
Yeah, I assume that we need to store it, right? Somewhere.
So yeah, what we're going to end up doing is when we have the distance, and then, so say if the distance, so close enough means,
Also
yeah, I
rename
guess,
this to should renderer be enabled. It's
yeah.
clear.
So we can say like if should renderer be enabled and renderer, or and we check for if it has the renderer disabled component. So that's basically what to like when we want to change the state, right? And basically the way that we check for that is there's just a thing that says has component, and it's part of the system-based namespace, so that'll just kind of allow us to get that.
Oh wow, I find this pretty cool.
Yeah. And then inside the type brackets, then we can just look for the render disable.
So if the renderer should be enabled, but it is not because it has the tag saying that it's actually disabled, then I guess we need to kind of flip the components, or actually just add the change render state, right?
So in this case, we'll just add the change render component. And so I don't know if the stream's cut up yet, but you just need to pass in the companion entity into the has component.
Yep, makes sense. Yeah. Done.
Okay, and then here we'll use our entity command buffer to actually add the change tag to that entity.
Yeah, it's the add component, I assume.
So ecb.add component, and then inside the type brackets, you can just pass in the change render state tag, and then inside the parentheses, just pass in the companion entity for now. We'll have to come back and change something on that later.
All right, it's done. And should I also do it the other way around? Like an else, if it should not be enabled, but it is, then add. Actually, it can be put in an or, right?
I'd say do an else if should render be enabled and has the render enabled tag.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put this on some type of or, I guess. I guess that we are gonna do the same, right? Which is to add the component itself, right? Or it shouldn't be enabled.
Yeah, however you want to optimize.
All right, so I am just done doing that. I'm going to read this just to make sure it makes sense. Should render be enabled, but it is disabled, or should not be enabled, but it's enabled. Then in any of these cases, I'm just going to add the change render state tag. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I'm pretty good, apparently, at messing up simple code like this, by the way. So that's why I always read it 3 times.
It's all good, man. Okay, so that should be all good to go. So basically, this is just basically detecting whether we need to turn the renderer on or off. And we basically, with this, is we're like trying to limit the number of times that we're using main threaded non-burst compiled code with reference types. So again, we're just looking for the specific instance where we need to change the renderer from enabled to disabled or the other way around. So this system should be squared away. I would say just remove the dot without burst for now. Let's go ahead and keep it running on the main thread for the time being, just so we can test it and make sure everything works first. And then, so what we need to do at this point is now we actually have not added the component, the change render state components to that entity, even though it looks like we have. We actually haven't done that yet. We've basically just recorded this operation to our entity command buffer. So now we actually need to basically play back those changes on our entity command buffer.
Come on. I would prefer it to be called Flash. It's so used to command buffers and all of this stuff. So it's called playback, right?
Yes. So it's ECB.playback. And then, at the end, the entity command buffer does need to be disposed, but we'll probably end up using the entity command buffer in another job in the system, so we can do that later.
It's requiring an entity manager reference.
Yep. And then so inside there, you just pass in the entity manager, just capital E entity manager, and that'll get the entity manager of the world that system is a part of.
It's actually a bit confusing because I would assume that it's actually the type, but yeah, I guess some type of public attribute. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I guess this is kind of a blocking call, right? When we do this playback, Unity is going to say, okay, let's stop everything right now, every job, whatever.
Right. Yeah. So this is again just kind of a hacky way to do this for now, just so we can just do a simple entity command buffer. There are better ways that we can do this by essentially hooking into already existing entity command buffers, but that's going to basically defer playback until later in the frame.
We don't want that yet.
Yes. This might give us problems later on for some things, but that's fine. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and create our two different jobs here for enabling or disabling the rendering. So we'll go ahead and do an entities.withAll. And then inside the type brackets, we'll go ahead and we'll do the disable rendering one first. So that we're looking for anything with the renderer enabled tag, as well as the change render state tag or whatever we called it.
So I could call this job in this case disable renderer, for example, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm kind of waiting for this stream to catch up. But so inside the type brackets, did you do a render enabled comma and then okay, cool.
The change render state tag. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. Yep, I'm seeing that now. And you have the with name. Perfect. Okay. So now inside our for each, you have to do, I see you got that other guy there for the Lambda function. So now we're looking for inside the query, I think all we need now at this point is the our reference to our renderer. So kind of similar to how we had it before, you just do your mesh renderer type with no ref or in, and then just call it the mesh renderer.
Yep, done.
Okay, and then so here, all you're going to go ahead and do is say mesh renderer dot disable or what enable equals false. And then after that, now we just need to take off the render enabled tag, take off the change render state tag, and then add the render disabled tag. So we're going to do all those operations using the entity command buffer. So again, very similar to how we did in the previous system, we can just do our ECB .add components and remove components operations for the.
I'm just going to do that. In the meantime, I assume that the entity should go before the mesh renderer, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to remove the change render state. It's going to remove as well the enabled tag, the render
Yep,
enabled tag, and it's also going to add a component, which is going to be, of course, the renderer disabled tag. Right?
correct.
And the other job should do the opposite, kind of, right?
Exactly.
Now, the question I would have in this case is, should I play back in between these two jobs? And I
Um,
guess not.
I would say no, because there's no, there would be no reason to.
All right. So in the second job, I'm going to give it a
And you do
name.
have to do a dot run at the end of your as you start for each.
Yep, that's a good point. So run without burst, I assume, right? Because we're messing with the reference
Yes, yeah,
types.
you do have to do. Yeah, this does have to be on the main thread without the burst compiler. Correct.
All right. That's done. So in the second job, I'm going to give it the name enable renderer
Yep.
with all render disabled, and yet I also want to change the render state. And in this case, I'm going to remove the component, which is renderer disabled tag. I'm going to remove the change state as well. And I'm going to add the renderer enabled tag because of course it is now enabled, right? After I
Boom.
changed the enable to true.
You got it.
And now at the end of these two jobs, should I do the playback or is Unity going to
Yes.
do
So now
these
you can
events?
do an ECB.playback and then an ECB.dispose.
All right. It's done. Although I'm getting a warning from Rider. Captured variable is
Yeah,
disposed in the
that
outburst.
happens. That's fine. You can just ignore that.
All right. So now
Ryder's trying
we'll
to be too smart
switch.
for you.
Are you saying that it is trying to outsmart me? Oh, Jesus, no. We have the sharing violation again.
Oh
But we
no!
guys know
Oh, we were
how
doing
to
so good.
fix it, right? Yes. Close
Only
the
the people who've been
project.
here for 2 hours know. No, thank you guys for all showing up. I mean, this has been a ton of fun so far. I mean, of course we're gonna keep going, but I think Ruben has some issues to work through. But hey, if you've been enjoying these streams, make sure you hit the like button on both Ruben's stream as well as my stream.
That
That would
sounds
be
very
much
creepy to
appreciated.
say. Ruben has its issues, right? His own issues. Let him be.
Yeah,
Let him
I
be.
mean, Ruben has his own issues, so just let him work through them.
Okay, so the solution for this problem was before to close it and open the project.
You're always
Nice.
having fun, so that's a good sign.
Okay, first time. Still, the error is there. Okay, so click ignore. I don't really know why this is happening, honestly. It is super annoying. But yeah, by the way, in the meantime, I can also read something aloud, which is very sadly, I have to leave. I wanted to say, I wanted to say that this has been the most useful session on dots that I have ever attended. The clear use case and detailed explanations totally made sense. Thank you both.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that nice comments. Hopefully you're watching the replay to finish off the stream. But yeah, I feel like it's been a ton of fun. I think it's definitely helpful for people to just kind of, go through everything really step by step and just kind of learn a little bit of the methodology as well as the implementations of how to do it. I think sometimes in some of my videos I can go a little bit fast sometimes through some things, but I think it's always good to just kind of take it a little slower and just step through things, really explain why we're doing each thing and all that. But yeah, I've been having a ton of fun. This has been great.
You seeing this, John? Well, it's the second time is still working. So that's the quick workaround. Open the project twice, like
Mount Unity
confirmed.
twice. There you go.
All right,
That's
so
all right.
it's compiled. Are we actually ready to play this? I mean, first I have to go to the prefab and disable the old script, which is the mono behavior based one. But other than that, are we ready to play?
Yeah. And oh yeah, looks like someone's saying that we might get some errors trying to play back our entity command buffer twice, but
I see.
that's
I see.
fine.
Okay.
You probably just have to take out that first playback, and it can just run on the next frame.
Should I play still and see if Unity
Yeah,
complains
see
about
what
it?
happens.
All right. So play mode enabled. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't want to see this. You guys don't want to see this. Just clear it.
Shield your eyes.
So I'm going to disable the first playback. And now you're saying, and I have to trust you, that you're saying that the other jobs are going to be executed on the next frame, right? That for me would be kind of a black box. I just trust you. But yeah, that's an important detail to take into account. How do you know that? Is it experience or?
Correct. So basically, the reason this is happening, again, like I was saying earlier, when we do an ECB.add component, that does not actually add the component to that entity right away. That just records that. And then that component isn't added to the entity until we play back our entity command buffer. Now, our entity command buffer isn't going to be played back until after those jobs that we have. Those other jobs that we have. I mean, we could do this if we like maybe separated this out into another system or had like a different entity command buffer.
That works, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that it is going to be delayed one frame, right? The activity or the activation of renderers. Okay, I'm just gonna hit play again. Okay, so far no errors, tons of cubes. I'm going to be moving the camera away and they are disappearing. So this is really good stuff, right? So I know that you might not be seeing that, but it makes me proud to see what I accomplished today thanks to your help. Of course, you guys know I'm exaggerating, okay? The original problem I had with consulting is done, it's solved. But I have to say that I'm still learning quite a lot of things. I was also pretty outdated, right? I've seen some stuff that is pretty useful to learn. So yeah, this is working. So what I would say is that I would like to compare now the cost of the original solution we had with mono behaviors with this system. But first, Johnny, are we done or do we need still to do something with this?
Yeah, so right now, basically everything is still being ran all single threaded.
Right.
So I mean, if you want, we can flip the multi-thread bit, as it were.
Okay, but now it's with burst.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically working all single threaded, kind of using an entity command or an entity component system. I know what I'm talking about. Pattern. So there are some optimizations just by using this kind of ECS pattern. But again, as of right now, everything's still running on the main thread. I will say that though, burst is enabled on our distance calculation system. So again, we're kind of at a point where we sort of have some optimizations, but there are a number of more things that we can do. Some of them we probably don't have time for today, but
but we're good to go, right? I can already take some measures. So I'm going to leave the original mono behavior enabled. So it might be, doing these switches crazily, but that's fine. It's going to record a few frames and do some comparison, right? So the original mono behavior, at least in this particular frame, let's actually take one that makes more sense, 1.66 milliseconds. And that's the case for 1000 cubes, okay? You can see it here, right? It's quite a long line. And if we go to the update function, I'm seeing quite a lot of allocations, but yeah, that's maybe another story. So I have the check LOD distance system, which is 0.1 milliseconds. It is obviously faster than previously because, of course, we are also just not, messing with the reference objects. And then we have the Actually, oh, I was almost confused. Okay, so we have the check LOD distance system, but that includes all the systems, right? The three systems that are inside. So the
Correct.
whole
Yeah.
system, the three systems are taking 0.1 milliseconds. Okay, so that's actually even better than I thought. So we are looking into comparing the numbers of 1.7 milliseconds for the mono behavior approach to, depending on how you want to measure that, maybe something like 0.35 milliseconds, depending if you want to take into account the copy transform from game object system and such. I would argue that we should take that into account. But even
Yeah,
then,
yeah, it makes sense because there is extra overhead that we are adding in with that.
yeah, exactly. But even then, the gains are quite substantial, right? I think before
Yes.
we did this, the previous iteration where we actually did this flip on the enabled flag, when we did this within the same system, when we only had one system, we had about 0.5 milliseconds more or less, right? And now we reduced that to, let's say, 0.34 milliseconds. Just trying to recall on top of my head, okay? So yes, we see definitely some progress in terms of performance, but we are not done yet, right, Johnny?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the last kind of big thing that we can do here is do some multi-threaded action.
Can we call the schedule parallel already?
Yep. So you go ahead and do schedule parallel. We will need to. So we will need to change up how our entity command buffer works. Let's. So basically, we're going to have two separate entity command buffers. So one will be essentially a single-threaded entity command buffer, and then one will be a parallel entity command buffer. So the single-threaded one will be required for those the single-threaded jobs down below. I think probably the most efficient way would be to use one of the built-in entity command buffers. So maybe we can just show that off real quick, just because it's not too terribly difficult to do. Um, so what you should do, just kind of for clarity's sake, we'll just go ahead and move that entity command buffer that we're creating, move that below the distance calculator job, just so it sits right above the two main threaded jobs, just so that's kind of, it's all kind of just makes it clear that that entity command buffer is for those two jobs down below.
I'm going to do that. I just messed the order. So the main thread, of course, is going to be the ones where we do the mesh renderer enabled flag. Okay. And the parallel one is going to be, of course, for the distance calculator, I assume, right?
Correct. So yeah, what we'll do, I think, yeah, instead of creating our own entity command buffer, we will use basically one of the built-in ones. So let me
Okay.
know when you're ready to start
I'm
doing
ready.
that. All right. So this would be a class scoped variable. It's going to be a private, and get ready for this name here. It's the end simulation entity command buffer system.
Okay, done.
And
And
then you can just call this like underscore ECB system is usually what I call it.
all right, done.
All right. Now we're going to need an on start running function. This should be a protected override void on start running. Oh, we already have that. Duh. So yeah, inside there, we'll just do our ECB system equals world.
Yep.
Again, that's the capital W world dot get existing system.
A logistic problem. Yes, Unity is taking a different world, I believe. Get existing system. Yep. Then I pass
And then
the
inside
type,
the
right?
type brackets, yep, end simulation entity command buffer system, and you don't need to pass in any arguments. And
All
then
right.
now in the on update function, where you have your ECB parallel, we'll set that equal to underscore ECB system dot create command buffer. And then after the parentheses, we'll just do a dot as parallel writer.
Right. That's going to be of type parallel writer, right?
Yep.
And there are many different types of parallel writer. So I'm just going to call this var.
Yeah, just call it
I
var.
use the wildcard. Okay.
Well, actually, so yeah, the type is entity command buffer dot parallel writer, just for clarity's sake.
All right.
But anyhow, yeah, that's fine. So, what we're going to need to do now is you can go ahead and change everything in your distance calculator over to that new ECB parallel. We are going to get some errors right off the bat, so
Doesn't
be
like the
warned.
companion entity anymore.
No, it likes the companion entity, but it just needs something extra.
Gotcha. Sort key, right?
Yep. And so the way that we get this sort key, and is the sort key first, or the first argument?
Yep.
Okay. So what you're going to do up in your entities.for each, after where it says entity, and this is, I might just like put this in the chat because it can be sometimes annoying to type in.
On Discord, right? On the private
Yeah.
Discord channel where we talk about cool stuff.
Yeah, you pass that as the second argument. So this is another of those kind of like special parameters for our entities.for each functions. And so this one goes after the entity, and it must have this exact specific naming convention with that proper capitalization like that.
Basically, it's an int entity
integer.
inquiry index.
Correct.
Index, yeah.
And so basically what this means is this is a unique index for every single entity in this query. Basically just starting at 0, going up to the maximum number. The reason that we have this is we pass that into our ECB operations. And then so when we go, because when we're doing things multi-threaded, there's kind of the whole concept of race conditions where we don't know exactly the order that things will be executed in. So by using this sort key, we can basically determine the order to play back our changes when we run our entity command buffer.
So can I think of that as the index of a for loop if I was iterating over a list of entities that I would be the entity inquiry index, right?
Correct. Yeah. So this particular entity that we're iterating across, it's going to, say it's like the third entity in that query, the number of that's going to be 2, but it's unique per entity.
Okay.
And so we need to do one more thing here, and let me get this correctly here. So this is system dot. Okay, so after our schedule parallel, you'll do our underscore ECB job system, or underscore ECB system dot add job handle for producer.
Can you repeat it? Because it's outside the entities, right? Just after the schedule parallel.
Correct. After the schedule parallel.
Yep. Go ahead, repeat it, please.
Yeah, ECB system dot add job handle for producer.
Yep.
And then pass in the capital D dependency property, which is a dependency property of this system base.
Okay. Oh yeah, because that's in the system base, right? I assume.
Yep. And yeah, so basically the reason that we need to do this is it basically adds the proper dependencies to our entity command buffer so that it knows like what jobs need to be completed before the entity command buffer
Okay, so
like
just for me to
package.
understand this, before we used to run this, on the main thread, and we were actually waiting for that, right? Now we are scheduling this to be happening in parallel, and because we are doing this, we kind of have to tell Unity that it has to eventually wait on this job, or job that we just scheduled, right? Is that correct?
So, close, but not entirely. The reason that we're doing it is not because we're scheduling it in parallel. The reason that we're doing this is because we're using one of Unity's built-in entity command buffers. And so we need to do this to pass in the proper dependencies. So we need to know what jobs need to be completed before our
I
entity
see.
command buffer can
Mhm.
play.
Okay, that makes more sense. All right.
And it looks like you're getting some errors down in your script.
Yeah, I didn't change it because do we still want to use the new entity buffer, the entity command buffer that we created for the main thread?
So we have to use the existing main thread entity command buffer for our other jobs
Okay,
because
so
those
the
are main
one that
thread
we
jobs.
create, right, as a temporal job with the allocator temporal job.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's just a matter of renaming this. Okay. And I assume we need to do a playback and a dispose at the end, right?
Indeed, we do.
All right. Let's see if Inti is happy with the compilation. Yep. Seems to be happy about the changes so far. Are we ready for a play mode test? Or
Let's let her rock, baby.
before I play, of course, I want to disable the previous one, the previous scripts, the old object-oriented programming script that always ends up sending me to the physiotherapist. Back pain. Okay, so let me move the camera. And this is not working exactly as I would expect. This is basically just switching the renderer enabled flag back and forth. So some type of synchronization issue, I assume. I mean, maybe it is looking fine, and it's just my eyes that are tired. It's 9 p.m.
Is that happening to all of them, or is it just the like ones around the edge?
Actually, let me check. Into everything, man. Oh man, this really hurts. No, not actually, not to everything, to everyone. There's one cube in front of me that is kind of working fine.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go back to our script. It's probably just because we're doing some weird things here.
Can I somehow run this on a single thread without changing or removing the add job handle for producer? Can I just make this single thread with run? Or does it change the way I need to do this?
Like the entity command buffer, you mean?
Yeah, can I just change the schedule parallel to just run? To run
That's
this
what we
on the
had
main.
before.
Yeah, but we had that before, but we had our own ECB, right? Our own.
It might let you do that.
I mean, I'm just gonna try it and see what's going on. But that's where I would possibly start if. No, it's fucked
Oh
up
no.
again, man.
Oh
Okay.
no.
So yeah, this is one of the things I would try at first, right? Okay, so this looks weird when it's in parallel. Maybe I can just run this on a single thread and try to keep the rest of the code the same. See if that changes or if it breaks. I'm just telling you this to make a bit of time for Unity to open again. Okay. Um,
Yeah, I'm trying to think if maybe there's something that we're doing in the way that we're scheduling these jobs so that like it it keeps going back and forth between the two different enable and disable jobs. Um, yeah, I mean, we can maybe do a little live debugging session here if we kind of go on some of these entities and just see if that tag is like for some reason constantly being added or removed. Um,
well, even more errors. Let's hope that the second time that's actually gone. Okay, so yeah, my only concern there would be, can I actually see that these components being added and removed on real time, because they seem to be alternating right every frame. So, well, I guess I
yeah, I
can.
mean, we can inspect them. Like if we find them in the dots hierarchy, we can look at the inspector and see. And I think someone in your chat had a good suggestion of just maybe just try a couple entities
Yeah,
at first. Is it still opening back up for you right now?
it's opening the second time. Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's looking good. I don't know, man. I cannot tell you why it's looking good, or it seems to be looking good from my side. I guess it's just a feeling that I developed over time with Unity, right? When it stops working and suddenly just unconsciously, you know, uh,
Restart twice. The restart
yeah, there it
twice.
is. So I'm gonna play, and this is working better, although not perfect. I only see one right now that is kind of okay. No, it's going back. Seems like if you leave it stable, it's kind of okay. But once you start messing with the tags, when you go far away and such, then this is kind of an endless loop, right? So I can just go to a cube, and I guess I can go to the dots hierarchy, and yes, it keeps adding and re-adding these components, right? Removing, re-adding, and such. And this
Mm.
is happening too fast for me to really see a pattern.
You could pause it and step through execution,
Oh yeah,
right?
that's a good step. So I have renderer enable tag. Next step, renderer enable tag plus the change renderer state tag.
Hmm.
Next step, renderer disabled tag and change renderer state tag. That's interesting.
Is it not being like properly removed or something?
Yeah, looks like.
That's weird because that was definitely working before.
So let me see. We have the ECB main thread. We allocated with a temporal job. We just remove two components and add one, remove two components, add another one, enable renderer without burst run.
Yeah, there might be. I think. Hmm.
I assume this is
Let's
not running
let's
twice, no?
go
If I,
ahead and
yep.
use that instead of creating our own entity command buffer.
Mm-hmm.
Let's use the end simulation entity command buffer system to create a single threaded entity command buffer.
All right. So ECB system dot or not dot
So yeah, we'll say our main thread ECB equals ECB system dot what is it,
create
create
command
command buffer,
buffer.
and you don't need to do the as parallel writer. But then at the end, you can't do the ECB playback and dispose. You'll just have to do the actually just pass the ECB system add job handle for producer. Just put that down at the very bottom of that class or that update method.
Okay. Okay. That was a lot of information. So right now I am stuck at ECB system dot create command buffer, and I didn't add anything else
Yep,
after
that's all
that.
you need. And
Okay.
then just go ahead and take the ECB system.add job handle for producer. Just take that line of code and put it down to the bottom of that update method.
All right. And we still dispose, do the playback and such, right?
No, take out the playback and dispose
All right.
because Unity will be doing that for us.
All right. I was wondering because, yeah, I'm actually literally calling a create command buffer. But yeah, okay. Let's see if Unity likes it somehow better. All right. Looks stable so far. Let me move the camera. Yep, it is working. So it would be actually a nice thing to actually research. Why was that happening?
I think it just has something to do with that combination of like things being played back later in the frame versus like we had two kind of command buffers that were executing at different times, and I think that just
Okay.
kind of caused some weirdness.
All right. So now what I'm going to do is to change the run for a schedule parallel.
Yep.
And I'm just going to take some frames, and that's, yeah, I think we should be done with the exercise, right?
Tim in the chat mentions this has definitely been a part of my experience with dots. Stuff just randomly not working anymore. Facts.
Yeah, I was not executing my system either. Sorry, the previous script either. So that was not the reason either. Okay, yeah. So we are at. Let me try to find the right marker. So the system is taking 0.11 milliseconds. I can totally see the job system being super busy, using most of my cores, I believe. And then, yeah, actually, it seems like we gained a bit of performance, although not a lot. And we're at about 0.30. Let me see another frame. Maybe we were just unlucky. So system plus, yeah. In this other frame, we are at 0.25. So yeah, that actually seems to be cheaper in general. Yeah.
Sweet.
There we go. I think at the end of the day, the important part is to check out the job, right? How the scheduling looks like, right? Because right now I'm seeing a very efficient way of using my cores, right? I mean, it's still idling quite a lot, but it is now kind of green. Before we had everything like running mostly on the main thread. So, oh yeah, I even see a job handle complete. So I guess there's some type of dependency there asking for the completion to finish.
Yeah, and that'll be kind of what that add job handle for producer basically means. So when there's kind of a built-in system that runs at the end of the simulation system group, which is the end simulation entity command buffer system. And when we do that dot add job handle for producer, it basically makes that it sets up all the job dependencies, for that NC command buffer on that particular system, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it makes
So that's
sense.
why it
Although I
forces
am
completion
seeing
of the
this
job.
in my own system. So I'm seeing the job handle complete in my own system, not later down the road. So I would, tend to think, why is it trying to complete this job like already
Oh,
in my own system instead of just waiting for, maybe in the future or something. So it might be that there is some type of dependency at some point.
Yeah,
But
and that might be we could kind of do some things like, moving the main threaded guys to another script,
Mhm.
and kind of playing around with the execution order or something like that.
But yeah, I think that would be more for another day. I
Yeah.
think this has been already
But
pretty
yeah, I mean that
productive.
kind of is basically, the basics of that LOD system that we wanted, where basically, again, we kind of started with this, purely mono behavior approach, just very simple, distance checking, enabling and disabling renderers. And then we basically optimized by creating these companion entities that get instantiated alongside these different cubes in our world, which can kind of take care of like the heavy distance calculations, do a lot of optimizations like that. And then like literally we just look at, what needs to change its renderer, and using the jobs or using the ECS, we can kind of filter out for what needs to change, and change it.
Yep, and the gains are clear, at least here in this machine. Yep, pretty good, man. Thank you, Johnny. You saved the day again.
Well, hey, I know there's still like a decent amount of people in here, but I guess maybe we can just kind of open it up for some kind of questions on this. I know we've been kind of going live for a while, but if anyone kind of has any related questions on here, maybe we can just kind of address those real quick before we move on here.
Going to change the layouts. Do not panic.
Hit the mic again.
It's going to take a while, I guess, for this layout to adjust.
Yeah. Couldn't see your screen the whole time.
Yeah, okay. So now I think we're good.
Yeah, I mean, I see yes now. I think we're all set here. Let's see. You see anything in your chat? Let's see. I see someone that says, I'm a little scared to jump into dots. It's like a mental block. I'm afraid I'll waste a ton of time by hitting a roadblock that I won't be able to solve. This channel makes it all more reassuring. Hey, glad to help you out here. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things. Like, I think, if you kind of watch this stream, there's kind of like some little gotchas that we kind of ran into along the way. And, just because I have kind of that experience of like coding a decent amount with the dots and ECS, I can say, oh, that's happening because of this, and that's happening because of this. But, on a lot of those things, a lot of those gotchas that I was pointing out today, it took like a lot of banging my head against the wall to try and like figure out, what exactly was going on and stuff like that. So, it's something that kind of does take experience. And, I feel like though we are getting into a little bit of a better state here. I guess kind of along those lines, someone also asked when dots 1.0. I don't know for sure. They basically say they're kind of targeting the 2022 LTS cycle. They've kind of been on pace with the NT 0.51 update, which was just released last week. And they said that they were kind of targeting Q2 of 2022, and they hit that just right at the end here. So they've been on pace with the 0.50 and 0.51, so that's been a good sign so far. So hopefully sooner than later. Looks like we do have, all right, let's see, Yorai. So I messed with dots yesterday, and one thing I ran into that I feel coerced into making iJob entity batch out of all my jobs. The type handle, writing, and passing is so time consuming. Any tips there? I don't know. Have you tried using a iJob entity at all instead? If that might work for some of your systems. iJob entity batch is it's something that I've kind of messed around with, and it's cool, but I think kind of iJob entity is sort of the new kid on the block for that. But yeah, I'd say mess around with that if you can. Let's see, is anything coming in through on your chat? I got a couple more questions here on mine though.
Yeah, I have someone saying, thank you guys, very informative. You're welcome. Have you seen this working on iOS, and does it perform?
So I haven't done any really performance metrics because I don't really want to fire up my crappy Mac Mini to make an iOS build of a game. But yeah, so basically the idea with dots right now is, anything that can run the universal render pipeline can essentially, run dots, and you will see kind of performance gains. I know that if you saw any like the GDC presentations or the streams that I was fortunately be able to be a part of, there was this one guy, Jonas. His company made a game called Detonation Racing, and this is a game actually for Apple Arcade, basically built from the ground up with dots and ECS, and they did a lot of really cool things. And I definitely know that they had a lot of good performance results with deploying to iOS. So it went to iPhones, iPads, Apple computers, all that. So yeah. So let's see. Question: how would you go about implementing further optimizations for this LOD system, such as a native spatial partitioner? I don't know. Do you have any kind of thoughts on how better we might be able to expand the LOD system?
Well, I think you can improve still on the ALU operations, right? You can make the distance square, all of these things, and
Yeah,
still
yeah,
a very simple system, right? It is, we have a hard-coded distance, so we would need to extend on that. But I think that the biggest gains would come from actually knowing your problem very well, right? The more specific you can tie that to your specific problem, right? The better the optimizations that you can actually make. To give you an example, the clients for which I was doing consulting, right, I required something like this. They were doing like recentering of the physics of the whole world to be around
mm,
the player, right,
yeah,
just to increase the accuracy of the physics. So one thing you can do in that case is like, well, if you are going to be most of the time on the center, right, the player itself, instead of calculating a distance, just assume that the player is always at 0, 0, 0, right? And then what you can do, I don't know, is maybe the distance is, just checking if you are at coordinate 10 or below or something like this, right? So what I mean is, yeah, you you can do a lot of stuff when you know that you are tackling a specific problem. If you are doing some type of assets, I think that's the most complex part, right? Because you have to accommodate that for any kind of use case. So, and to be more specific about, in general, I don't know, special partitioning and such. I don't know. I would just need to read on this kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's kind of good advice for all kinds of problems, especially data oriented ones. Is just really knowing what your problem is, and I think the best kind of advice that I've received and I could kind of give as well is optimize for the most like the most frequently occurring or most frequently occurring situation. So, if you have kind of some edge cases that are not really happening all that often, you don't necessarily need to, tune your whole system to, make it really efficient in that one particular case. Just, really consider, what is, the state that the game is going to be in most often, and kind of optimize for that. So that kind of goes back to like the debate of like tagging components versus flagging them. If something is going to most likely be in one state most of the time and it's not going to be changing state very frequently, then optimize for the case where you kind of filter out things by tag. Now, if you know that things are going to be, frequently changing state, like every other frame, it's going to be maybe changing state. Then in that case, then yeah, it would probably actually make more sense to just, have a Boolean flag, and you can go ahead and just check against the flag there.
Sounds like wise words, Johnny. All right. No more questions from my side, on my
So
channel.
yeah, let's see. We got a couple more here. I think we can kind of run through a few of these real quick. Is it worth going into Unity's dots or go with a custom solution like NTTS? I always butcher how to pronounce that. NTTS. Anyhow, it's yeah, I mean again, it's kind of one of those things, really depends on your needs. If you're looking for like some kind of data oriented solution, I think Unity's dots is a great place to get into. I think the documentation is getting much better. There are good resources like the Unity forums and my Discord community tmg.dev/discord, by the way. That there are a good amount of people developing with it. I mean, it's not like as wide as it is with Unity. Like, how Unity is, whenever you have a problem, you Google it and like 1,000 people have that same problem and you can find a solution to it relatively quickly. It's not quite at that level yet, but it is getting to the point where a fair amount of the problems that I'll encounter in dots, I'll find people online talking about. So I think it's in a good spot right now. And again, something like the NTTS, I don't know, I'm sure it's great. I haven't actually used it, but I would assume that the user base is going to be much smaller than just regular Unity dots. So that's just something to keep in mind. So yeah, I can't really comment on how it compares to dots, but yeah.
Also have to say that, just taking the technical part aside, I would also consider, if it was important for you, right? For me, it would be important. I would also consider the career path, right? If I work 2 years with Entitas, for example, and I became the best in the universe at that, right? How helpful would that be for my future in terms of careers? Would I be able to go to a job interview and say, I understand Entitas and this is how it works and blah, 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 blah. Maybe some companies like it, but maybe some other companies tell you, that's great, but we use dots here, so you are not welcome anymore. Now, I'm exaggerating, but you get the point, right? I would not only consider the technical point.
I agree. I agree with you for the most part. I think that's really good advice. But I feel like right now, it almost seems like data-oriented programming is like a little bit of a niche. So if you kind of have like any data-oriented experience, like that's going to be a leg up on anyone who doesn't have any. But of course, I feel like the adoption for something like Unity dots is going to be bigger for larger and more established companies than like Entitas.
Entitas, yeah.
Entitas. You say
I think I don't know. Coming from Spain, I think it just sounds like Entitas, right? It just
that's
simpler for me. That's how I would call it.
What are these Entitas?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what else. Let's see. Would you recommend investigating DOS to someone less senior and not yet pushing Unity to its limits or wait? I'd say in general, as of right now, if you don't necessarily need dots for anything and you don't, have any interest in getting into data-oriented programming, there's no real need for you to jump in and look into it. But I think it's a ton of fun. I really enjoy data-oriented programming, and I think it's great. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have like any necessary like use cases for it right now, then yeah, just regular mono behaviors is totally fine, and I generally recommend sticking with that. Let's see. Ruben, are we going to collaborate on a course?
I actually asked him before the live stream. I was like, Johnny, did you ever think about making a course on dots? Because I would honestly take it. I wouldn't pay for it because I will ask him to not to get it for free. But if I didn't know him, I would for sure pay for it. And jokes apart, I kind of get it that dots is changing a lot. So it's a pain in the ass to make a course and only for it to change a few. I don't know, the next day or something. That will be not that great. But even as of today, right, as a performance consultant, sometimes the only way to go forward when you have an ultra low budget of 10 milliseconds or something like this is to really get rid of a lot of these expensive mono behaviors. That's my opinion and my experience, that sometimes I wished I was, an expert on dots, it is not that I cannot do stuff. I do it, but I would definitely still pay for a course, right? I told Johnny the other day, man, you had a lot of content on YouTube, right? But for me, it's hard to find the right path, right?
Yeah,
the
no,
right
I get
learning
it. It is
curve.
a little disorganized right now. Yeah.
So to answer that partially, I would pay for a course, Johnny. And if we
Glad
are
to know
going
I
to
have one buyer.
collaborate or not, But no, we didn't decide or talk about that actually. I mean, we do some promotions from time to time, but doing course together, don't know.
Well, I mean, hey, just for the people who are this deep in this video, maybe I'll give a little tease on something coming up. Don't have a course in the works right now. I think maybe that might be something that I revisit closer towards the 1.0 release of Dots when things are a little bit more kind of locked in place. But I am working on a project right now that is I'm really excited about, and I think it definitely can be a good learning resource for a lot of people. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. And I'm definitely gonna be talking about this kind of some more. So just give you a little tease on that for now. But yeah, I'm really excited about this project coming up. I'm having a lot of fun with it.
I think Johnny, I'm going to spoil it. And
No,
then just end the stream.
I haven't even like told you all about what the project is.
Joking. All right. Any more questions? I guess not.
Yeah, I think those are kind of about all the main questions for now. I mean, we've been live for over 3 hours now, so that was an awesome stream. Yeah, thanks for Ruben
Actually,
for
the
you kind
longest
of came
one.
up with this idea for the stream, and yeah, I had a ton of fun. I think we went over some cool stuff. I think I sure hope a lot of people um, learned some stuff and got some good value out of it. Yeah, thank you all for showing up, asking some good questions along the way. Yeah, you got any parting words here, Ruben?
Was a lot of fun. It's the longest stream or live stream for me because I'm not used to do the long ones, right? But the fun kept me going. I will be maybe ready for another hour, but actually, it's also 9 p.m.
I'm ready to
here.
eat. It's
Me
lunchtime
too.
for me.
Ready to eat, ready to sleep as well. So thanks a lot. I think that was cool. So hope to keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, thanks again for tuning in, everybody. I do want to be doing some more of these live streams. I'm going to talk with some more people to do some other things. Maybe um, just kind of chatting about some things. But I think this live coding session was cool. So maybe we'll do something like this again. But yeah, thanks again, everybody. And catch you in the next one.